Thanks. I want to thank everyone for coming in New Iberia and President Larry and hosting this meeting. And I think it's the first time we've ever had it here in New Iberia, and we sure appreciate it. And please silence your phones, and we're going to get started. First, we'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Higgins, call the roll, please.
Chairman Doug.
Present.
Mr. Davidson.
Present.
Mr. Bosworth.
Present.
Mr. Lane.
Lang or
Lane. Long, L-A-N-G.
Sorry.
Lieutenant Governor Nyesser. Mr. Alford. President Jewell.
Present.
Congressman Dow. Mr. Jordan.
Present.
Mr. Bourgeois.
Here.
Mr. Hidalgo.
Here.
Ms. Cormier. Mr. Carville.
Here.
Mr. Lane.
Here.
Representative Lane. And Senator Hinkins.
We have a forum. And with that, we the welcoming by Parish President Larry Reshore, the Parish President of Iberia Parish, Mr. Reshore, which we've been working with quite a bit on some projects, and thank you for hosting us, President Reshore.
Thank you so very much. First of all, I don't know where I should stand. Look at you guys. Look at that. First of all, I thank God for allowing all of us to be here today. Beautiful day that He's created. I want to thank the CPRA board for coming to Iberia Parish. Like Steve already said, this is the very first time it's happened in Iberia Parish. It's a great working relationship that we have with CPRA. We have a lot of projects that we're currently doing in Iberia Parish, flood control structures, pump stations, and in fact, right now, we're working on a commercial canal, development canal, and levee systems in Iberia Parish. Governor Landry actually wants to spend money, and we certainly want to be on that receiving end. And the CPRA is doing a fantastic job at including Iberia Parish and what they're doing. And I thank you so very much to the board and you, sir, for everything that you're doing. Welcome to Iberia Parish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And, you know, I'd also like to mention past Senator Craig Romero, who is the director of the Port of Iberia, which we do quite a bit of work with, and they're real heavy into the scholarships of students, and we thank you for that. And Mr. Romero, thank you. It's been great working with you. I think you're here somewhere. Thank you. We worked with him quite a bit on the same levee system and about the floodgates. Well, you know, as you know, Iberia has no levee system, no floodgates, so it's quite a large task that's being undertaken, and we're going to move forward. And with that, approval of the agenda, motion to approve the agenda. So approved by Mr. Bourgeois. Second. Second motion, all in favor? That motion passes. Motion to approve the minutes, motion by Mr. Corville, second by Mr. Hidalgo. All in favor? Ask folks not to lean back in chairs. They recline pretty hefty, so I got a little more here. I want to make sure I get all my orders correct. And, any old business, any members would like to discuss any old business? Any old business? Seeing none? Implementation and update in 2024 year in review. Glenn Leday, Executive Director of CPRA, who's been been real busy with projects, and Mr. Ledet.
Thank you, Chairman Dove and members of the board. Excited to be here in New Iberia Parish. As President Larry Richard said, we're excited. We got a lot of good things happening in this part of the state. So we've got a really good agenda showcasing a lot of those projects that CPRA is leading, and then also partnering with our partners both in Iberia Parish, Vermilion Parish, other areas, as well as DENR and wildlife and fisheries. We've got some really good updates. So excited about this agenda. My implementation update today will be relatively short because we have a pretty healthy agenda on all of these project updates. And then we also have started providing a year-end review. So we started doing that really to just showcase all of the active work that we updated the board on this year. So we've got a lot of slides. I'll try to fly through that just so you can get a quick snapshot of the efforts that we've done in 2024. So really good update there. But as we get started, we always touch base on the number of active projects, and as we saw last month, those have ticked up to 109 active projects. And so some of the really the big change that you saw, we finished a project in construction that we'll touch base on today, Long Point. We had a project move over from planning to engineering and design, and that is the St. Tammany Flood Risk Reduction and Hurricane Protection Project. That is now in the Word of Bill, and we are preparing for that to be authorized hopefully soon by Congress. And so getting ready for that and moved it into the engineering and design phase. So you'll see, we'll continue to update you on that, but we've still got really probably some of the most active projects we've ever had in the agency's history at 109. But with that, we want to update you on some of the projects that we've got in engineering and design here in Iberia and Vermilion parishes, and just touch base on some of those and then let you know when those are going to construction. And so the first is a set of water control structures and flood protection structures that we are working on with Iberia Parish. We had really a set of 5 or 6 of these. Some of those are in construction. These that you're looking at here are Little Valley Bayou, Rutten Real Road, and Stumpy Bayou. Those are work, engineering and design work that's being completed by Iberia Parish, and we have an intergovernmental agreement with them to help fund that. Their design team is working on that, going really well. That is anticipated to go to construction in spring of next year when all of the permitting is done. But that, along with the projects that they are completing now, is really a set of flood protection and water control structures. Obviously, as we know, as tidal impacts continue to impact our coastal communities, finding ways to put these water control structures with backflow prevention is a lot of the work that we do across the state. This is similar, is looking at the flood protection system we'll talk a little bit about later today, and then how do we also incorporate hydrologic control structures that allow flow and drainage to occur but prevent that tidal impact from occurring in our communities. So this is the same thing. We'll go to construction with these next year, and Iberia Parish will lead that through an IPA with CPRA. In addition to that, we have the Cheniere T Bridge Restoration Project. This is an area that was impacted by hurricanes, predominantly Hurricane Laura and Delta. And so in this part of the area in the state, bridges are some of the first lines of defense of coastal protection. And so we had a lot of scour and other impacts and erosion that took place in and along this area they call Cheniere T. And so this is a ridge restoration project. This is another partnership with the local parish, with the Vermilion Parish Police Jury. And so they are leading this project with funding from the state. And so they are working hard to get this design done and hopefully get that to construction soon. But just really continuing on that theme of partnerships, trying to find ways to partner with local communities, either through parish matching or other areas. And this is one of those examples of the Vermilion Parish Police Jury is leading that. And then with that, we want to kind of highlight a CPRA project that is moving to construction. We've touched on this with the board recently, and so that is a rec use project, a recreational use partnership. And so that is the Bayou Pigeon Boat Launch Improvement Project in Iberville Parish. And so oftentimes this boat launch in this area is really known as the gateway to the basin. This is one of the most heavily used boat launches in the basin, particularly for the crawfish farming community there. And so this is a project that we partner with Iberville Parish on. CPRA is leading this with state funds from capital outlay and state surplus. But this is looking to really expand the boat launch. And so currently it really just has one double boat slip. And so we're expanding that to include 3 double slips as well as a single slip. It's going to have significant parking improvements with ADA compliance. It's got lighting improvements that are being provided by the parish. It's got improvements to the guard shack and other things. And so really a large effort that we're going on there, and excited to get that started. That design was completed this year, and then construction was just awarded to LA Contracting. And then we are working towards a notice to proceed in January. And we'll probably have an event there with Iberville Parish. But that is a really good project. It's approximately $2.5 million project with the construction costs coming in right at $2 million. Lataire Engineering, Geoengineers, and Neil Schaefer supported CPRA, and Ryan Lazina's team on the engineering for that. But a really good project. We'll be providing you updates throughout 2025 on the construction of that. But again, this is, some of the work that we do obviously is not always on the restoration side, but these recreational improvements are important to getting communities out to our wonderful coastal areas, and this is a great example of that. And so with that, we're happy to transition into the 2020 year-end review. And so this is really a year-end review of the first 10 months of our year. And so a lot has gone on, as you know, and a lot of good work that's being done by the agency and by all the partners that you'll hear from today, as well as throughout the year. And so just want to highlight some of these numbers. We always kind of collect this information and present this, particularly as we present our annual plans and our master plan. But as you can see there, a lot going on. We had 16 new construction starts. That $3 billion is obviously massive. It was because of the Southwest coastal update, but within that number, $324 million of efforts have been started by the state, in addition to that Southwest coastal, which got that number up to $3 billion. But we have 16 new construction starts. You've got roughly 2,734 acres of marsh that was created by our dredging program, which is essentially the equivalent of one of the historic Quipper projects every month. You've got almost 16 million cubic yards of sediment that was pumped. 10 projects were completed, some of which we'll touch on today, and over 11 miles of levee were improved this year. So really a tremendous amount of work that's going on. Obviously, we've got some federal projects that help bolster these numbers like West Shore and Southwest Coastal, but it's a lot of work, and will continue throughout the remainder of this year and next year. With that, I'd like to just touch on some of the completed projects we had this year that we showcased to the board. We've got some projects in progress, some of the groundbreakings and the new starts we'll touch on, and then give you kind of a flavor of what's been going on with our partners and some other big coastal wins. And so just for the sake of time, I'll move quick and then obviously be here to answer your questions. As you know, I just talked about for rec use, we had a really large recreational use park improvement project that we completed this year, at the beginning of this year. That's the Sycamore Point State Park improvements. You can see there it's got RV campsites, beach nourishment, breakwaters. It has a boardwalk, so it was really an awesome project. We are working with state parks to schedule a ribbon cutting, but that's one of these awesome projects right there at the boundary of Iberia and St. Mary Parish here in South Central Louisiana that we're excited to feature. In addition to that, other projects here in Iberia and St. Mary, we completed earlier this year the Freshwater Bayou Shoreline Protection Project. You can see all of the agencies involved in that. Again, just a great project that was featured in our annual plan this year, and that was completed right at the beginning of the fiscal year. So a really great project to provide almost two miles of bank line stabilization at Freshwater Bayou near Coles Bayou in Vermilion Parish. And then one of the great projects we actually featured last month at our board meeting in Lake Charles was the Long Point Bayou Marsh Creation Project. And as we talked about last month, really just a great partnership with Wasco and the Corps and CPRA to take a project that started under CPRA, using that Sitco settlement, and then use beneficial dredge material from the Calcasieu Ship Channel. So really just a flavor of all different types of projects that we did and completed in 2024, whether it's marsh creation, shoreline protection, or recreational use. But with that, we obviously have a ton of projects that are in progress, and just want to touch on some of the things that we shared with the board this year. First is, we updated the board a couple of months ago. Brian Lazine and the Water Institute leading that effort that they're doing on coastal carbon research and development. Talk to you about the ability that our projects have to remove carbon at a rate 10 times greater than tropical forests, as you see, and how can we tap into that carbon credit voluntary market that's out there? How can we look at proving that our projects have the permanence needed to be able to earn revenue potentially for the state? So we had a great panel session this past week with the Water Institute and the entire team that was working on that at CPRA. And so a lot of good movement on there. We'll obviously update you on that as we complete that effort next year. One of the big projects that the CPRA community has continued building is the LaBranch East Marsh Creation Project in St. Charles Parish. We've talked a lot about that. That's a great project that was led by our partner NRCS. This is one of the largest projects in CPRA's history at almost 1,500 acres. And again, it's trying to showcase the ability to really leverage projects and funding. And so this was a project really combining two CPRA projects into one and building a massive marsh creation project there in St. Charles to help restore habitat, but also provide resiliency to the community in St. Charles. So glad to see that project is getting close to being completed. I think the dredge is maybe demobilizing and getting towards final completion and substantial completion. In addition to that, the effort we've talked a lot about is the restoration work that's going on at Grand Isle. And so, we've had the ability to update the board as well as the Corps. The beach work that's being done as part of the IDA repairs is nearing completion. They're shaping the beach. I think all of the sand has been pumped on the island. All of the repairs to the segmented breakwaters and to the jetties have been completed. The team is now actively working on the completion of the dune repair. We'll be doing that for the next several months, and we'll update you when that's completed. But in addition to that, CPRA is finalizing the engineering and design evaluations of the completion of the shoreline breakwaters. And so, we talked early when the administration got in office and Chairman Dove and the effort to complete that breakwater system. And so CPRA did that work in conjunction with the Corps, delivering that report, and then that is moving on to headquarters for future funding and design completion to move to construction. So we'll be updating you in January on that effort as the New Orleans district progresses that effort. So just exciting work to see that being completed. And then always love to talk about the Lake Vaughan Marsh Creation Project that CPRA is leading. So this is, again, one of the largest projects in the state and the nation's history in terms of marsh creation at almost 3,200 acres. It's got 8 marsh creation cells with dredging being done from Lake Vaughan and pumped into that historic lake rim. That work is progressing really well. Mike Cooks is leading that construction, and we actually met with him earlier this week. So a lot of good work going on. There's sheet pile wall closures where there's historic bayous. Some of the cells are being completed and planted. So that's fantastic. And we're excited to have that ribbon cutting, and hopefully that will be one of the nation's largest marsh creation projects in our history. And then finally, kind of talking about restoration is a lot of the updates that we did with Wildlife Fisheries and U.S. Fish and Wildlife on the Chandelier Island restoration. And so on this theme of large projects, this is actually going to be probably our largest barrier island restoration project in CPRA's history. We talked to you earlier this year about the sea turtle crawls that took place that were documented, just the amount of habitat, the critical habitat that's endangered there. But as you can see in that chain from 1855 to present, almost 90% of the island has eroded. So it is critical for St. Bernard Parish and Louisiana. and we are moving at lightning speed to get that done. And so that's going to be over, hopefully over a $300 million project with multiple funding sources. So we are excited to kick that off next year, and we'll continue to update the board on that progress. And then, of course, Hurricane Francine hit in September of this year. The unfortunate devastation that hurricanes cause that we documented in Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes and other areas like St. Charles and St. Mary. But, there's a silver light there. We did a lot of recovery work since then, and then also got to document the amount of protection that our hurricane protection systems provide, like Northampton to the Gulf. And so considerable amount of work that's been done by our communities, by our levee districts. And so we thank y'all for all the hard work that y'all put in. And obviously, GOSEP and our team will continue to work hard for continued recovery. But just want to highlight the amount of work that went on that month and has continued to go on since then. We're going to continue to work with the federal government on potential supplemental requests that Mr. McMillan will update you on. But just a lot of work that went on that month and has continued to go on by all of our teams, and so wanted to just touch on that. And then one of the things that we'll transition to in groundbreakings is just the tremendous amount of work that has gone on in St. Charles, St. James, and St. John Parish on both the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain effort by CPRA, the Corps, and Pontchartrain Levee District, but also now the Maurepas diversion project. And so we're excited to really feature the groundbreaking of this project on December 3rd, upcoming in a couple of weeks, and then and really move on one of our largest mitigation projects that we're doing for the Corps for this major effort. And so, as everybody here is aware of, and we've updated you on throughout the year, it's just the tremendous amount of work that you see off of Interstate 10 between Baton Rouge and New Orleans that's ongoing to build this 19-mile levee system. Obviously, it protects 3 parishes. The Corps is working hard on the St. James effort to try to look at the evaluation there for that additional protection, and then the amount of work that they're doing in St. Charles and St. John. So I'm just excited to showcase this amount of these videos and the work going on there. And then, of course, we had a significant number of groundbreakings this year. The first is on the Mark-Anza to the Gulf system. We're excited to show the work that we did to get to the construction on the Houma Navigation Canal Lock Complex. That groundbreaking in August of this year. And then in October, we had the Reach A groundbreaking, the Corps' effort that they did to get that system started in October of this year. That's Reach A, as you know, is one of the final gaps to finish interim protection of this 98-mile system. So it's a tremendous effort. They did a tiered environmental assessment to get that component to construction as soon as possible. And so it was great to see both of those things take place. Of course, in Southwest Louisiana last month, we had the groundbreaking on the first pilot project for Southwest Louisiana for the home elevations. That's the 18 homes as part of that pilot to initiate really the great work that the Corps and CPRA and the local communities there are going to do. And so this is a rendering of the home there on Winnie Street that we'll be doing. And then we also updated you on all of the restoration work that we're kicking off as part of Southwest Coastal, those billions of dollars of environmental restoration. CPRA is leading the design as work-in-kind credit for the work to protect Rockefeller as the first segment of that. And we're going to utilize $50 billion for construction that was allocated to the Corps over the last 2 fiscal years. And then touching on some coastal wins, and so we had really a lot of big wins this year. We had the largest fiscal year annual plan approved by the legislature unanimously at over $1.7 billion as soon as we got into office. We actually had 2 of the largest restore grants, one for the Houma Navigation Canal Lock Complex, and then one for Maurepas, as well as that groundbreaking award from FEMA to St. Charles Parish for the Lake Leary project. I'm sorry, St. Bernard Parish for the Lake Leary project from CPRA match. Thank you, John. And so that's great. That preserves that ability and showcases the ability for nature-based solutions to provide resiliency and protection to coastal communities. Want to highlight a lot of our partner teams that are doing a lot of great work. You can see there, Restore Retreat did a planning in October of this year on West Grand Tear. And so that was one of the islands that was recently restored by CPRA. And they had a great event to do a planning there in October 12th. And then CRCL kicked off the oyster recycling program in Baton Rouge. And so that's one of the state's only large-scale shell recycling program. And you can see CPRA and Wildlife and Fisheries there in attendance and DENR to support them in the kickoff of that. And then a couple of recent wins. We're happy to report the constitutional amendment passed to dedicate federal revenues from offshore alternative energy production to the Coastal Protection and Restoration Fund. And we really thank everybody for all of the work they did to go out to the polls and trust us with those funds. It was great to see the overwhelming support, over 70% passage there. And so if we can get the companion legislation with Congress and the federal government passed, we'll get additional revenue for the coastal fund. And Mr. McMillan will update you on that great effort later today. Finally, on coastal winds, we have a new announcement that we'd like to make today, and that is for additional funds for our communities, particularly in Orleans and Jefferson Parish. And so we're happy to report to the board that we were able to work with the Corps of Engineers to receive interest relief for interest accrued during construction of our SELA drainage projects. And so this is a program, the Southeast Louisiana Urban Flood Control Program has been around for a while. In these programs, typically the Corps of Engineers and the federal government charges interest as they build these projects. And so we have asked them throughout this year. Chairman Doug made a strong effort with Sewage and Water Board to push to get interest relieved during construction. I'm happy to report that the Corps of Engineers did grant us that. We're actually working now to help amend that deferred payback agreement, and so we can solidify that. But happy to report that renegotiation is set to deliver an estimated up to $68 million in interest relief, as well as future relief that will not be charged for interest during construction. And so what does that mean? That means we can take those dollars that would have otherwise been paid to interest and reinvest those into projects to help those communities in Jefferson and Orleans. So really great news that we're happy to report today. And then finally, in closing, we've got the outreach that we do here at CPRA. We've got a great outreach and engagement team, as well as at the governor's office. We started off the year, you can see, with a great coastal day with an address from Governor Landry, as well as Chairman Dove, the good work that we're jumping into that we'll talk to you about today. We had a great event at our LSU Center for River Studies, where we were able to do a matchmaking and networking event for small businesses and large businesses. Over 200 people came through, as well as connected to our partners like Restore and Retreat and CRCL. And then we actually kicked off a large Industry Week webinar for Coastal Week. We had webinars every day that have had over 400 views throughout the year. And so we'll continue to expand Coastal Day relating to Coastal Week for the legislature next year, but just a lot of good things happen there. Of course, we do constant federal outreach throughout the year, whether it's the travels with our levee districts or the Shores Coalition. But you can see we even have staff for site visits from the congressional delegation or projects. Did a great visit with the congressional staff from Arkansas to the Gulf. But Neil McMillan's going to update you on a lot of that, but just a lot of good activity that's going on there. And then, of course, thinking about our facilities, we've got great progress on the Nichols Coastal Center. It's nearing completion. We are excited to move into the construction of the build out for the coastal area for CPRA's Thibodeau Regional Office, as well as the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities. So that's moving to construction. The building is continuing to progress. I know Lacey gives us these great update emails with these pictures, and so we'll have some events here next year as we finish construction. But great to see that moving forward. And then, of course, at the water campus, we've got that wonderful Center for River Studies. This year, we had almost 7,800 visitors, constantly having people that want to see that facility and presentations there. So we'll continue to expand that, and really just excited to see the connection there at those two centers. And then finally, our team continues the community outreach throughout the year, whether it's our master plan or our annual plan, or just the outreach engagement events that we host, always trying to connect with the stakeholders in the community. And we've really continued to progress that. And then finally, the look ahead just over the next couple of months, what you can expect. The first is, as we roll into January, we will be presenting our draft annual plan for FY 2026. And so, as we do every year, we present that to the CPRA board. We take comments, present that to the public over a series of 4 public meetings, 3 in person, 1 virtual. And then we eventually come back to the board with the final plan that hopefully gets adopted and then moves to the legislature later that spring. So we'll have an active spring, obviously, with that. And then, of course, as we talked about earlier this year, we don't stop working on the master plan. We'll have continued community engagement for the 2029 master plan. In addition, we'll be taking requests for projects for that 2029 analysis. And so that'll take place next year as we reach out to all the parishes, levy districts, and the communities for ideas for projects. But just a lot going on there. Obviously, like I said, our outreach engagement team is always trying to connect. And so whether it's social media or website, excited to talk with you. But happy to kind of go through that year in review. Like I said, a lot going on, and happy to take any questions from the board.
And on behalf of myself and the board, I'd like to thank Glenn and Dave. I mean, this guy puts in a 12 hours just about every day. It's amazing what he's put together with CPRA and his staff, a lot of guys and gals who's here today. And CPRA has really come through with everything we requested and moved everything forward. We've met with just about every parish president on their needs internally, not only coastal-wise, and we continue to keep moving that. And you know, Glenn and his staff have been tremendous, and we thank you, Glenn. And I'd also like to reach out, I don't think the Corps is here today, but Colonel Jones and his staff have really worked well with us to expedite Grand Isle. I mean, we were looking at 3 or 4 years before we were going to complete the segment of Breakwater Rocks, and this should be coming next year if everything falls in line. Along with Reach Aid, they move forward 2 or 3 years. And the Southwest project, raising homes, we went to that groundbreaking, they moved that forward. And Colonel Jones and his staff is also on a saltwater wedge issue in the Mississippi River on Plaquemines and St. Bernard. They've really kept us and the governor abreast of everything, and I believe they're gonna have about a 30-day lapse in that. You know, as you know, when the river gets down to 300,000 CFS, the water starts coming in from the south to the north, and you know, the colonel and them have really worked with us and kept us abreast of that, and worked with the parish presidents in consecutive parishes, and you know, like I said, it's all coming together, and you know, I thank everyone, and one thing I've got to correct, we do not have a quorum, or we have no official votes today. Every couple of people short, so I want to make sure that's on the minutes of the meeting. Any other questions? I mean, any other comments, questions? Mr. Bourgeois?
Yeah, again, I echo the chairman's statement. Thank everybody at CPRA and you know, countless number of agencies and entities and corps and partners and all of those engineering firms, you name it, construction companies. But it gets to the point where I know, for me personally, it's I get too close to the trees to see the forest. So just simply, wow, this is amazing. All the things we've accomplished. The one thing that I will point out is we have to be careful not to become a victim of our own success. We need to make sure that the entire delegation I know our southern delegation always knows, but the northern part of the state needs to know as well that, yes, this is a lot of money. It's a lot of federal money that we leverage to get the federal money here, but we've got a huge task still ahead of us. And so I just encourage everybody to make sure that we continue to make sure that there's a recognition statewide that we have a huge need. Most of the money that's being spent is coming from other sources, and encourage every agency to try to leverage those other federal sources as much as possible to the benefit of the
Any other comment? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had two things, and that might be it, but let me, in case something else comes up. But number one, I was hoping that maybe we could get a report, perhaps, from Mr. Leday on CPRA's involvement in the QIPR program. I noticed the votes came through, and it seems like that program has really evolved into almost exclusively in marsh creation. There's a bunch of different moving parts in that. CPRA is a key player in that, particularly in holding fast to the master plan, which has been a welcome breath of fresh air to that program. But as I alluded to last month, there's obviously some places that we can improve that process. But it seems like it's evolving into exclusively marsh creation, which I'm not convinced is the best use of those resources in all instances. And it also seems, particularly in the central and western part of the state, that the parish priorities seem to sometimes get overlooked. So I'd love to see maybe just a programmatic update and CPRA's involvement and leadership in that program, and then maybe that will begin to spawn some ideas on how maybe that program can get a little bit better. It's a great program, it does great things, but as the chairman has alluded to, we can always get better. So that would be number one. My second part, and I don't know if this will be a presentation at an upcoming meeting, but in the master plan, there's a section carved out for reefs. I know that you guys have been working together with Wildlife and Fisheries on a lot of development of that. One idea that I've been bouncing around, at least in my head, and maybe with a few others, it seems like it would be good to have us map out the coast for suitable substrate that would hold the reef up, and then find a way to complement with the master plan outfalls and different features. But at some point, I'd really like to see us, maybe you guys give a presentation, maybe a joint presentation to this board on that section of the master plan, and then how that's going to be able to complement restoration features, and then how other outside partners, I know CCA has a lot of interest in inshore reefs for obvious reasons, where we can build a coalition to kind of move that forward. So I'd appreciate those two items at some point finding their way onto the agenda, Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge me on that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Corbo, yeah, first on briefs, happy to do that. I know Ryan Lazine and his team have already been dialoguing with Mr. Bosworth at Wildlife and Fisheries on that. So we'll be happy to work with them and get that update for you, and then probably do a presentation here at the board meeting. And then second is on QIPR. Yeah, obviously, the QIPR program has been around for a long time and has done a lot of great things. And so, but always excited to dialogue about ways to continue to innovate and improve that program. We will provide an update, an annual update at the January meeting to the board on the projects that have been done the last couple of years.
Yes, Vice President Dewey.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two notes. I want to say thanks for the update on the Little Branch Wetlands project. That looks great out there. For those of you who don't know, and just to echo just some of the thoughts on QIPRA, we really need to, through the QIPRA program, whenever we can work with the federal government in that program to expedite those projects is incredibly important, because the Little Branch Wetlands project was identified in 1990 as a need. And some of the original documents that I saw was that it was going to cost about $6 million to do that project. Well, we just spent $60 million to do that project. So I think it's just incredibly important. And I know that's not on our end. I think CPRA does a great job of moving these projects forward. But just as we work with our federal delegations, permitting reform needs to be of top mind for these projects, considering what we are trying to work on here. We are trying to put things back the way that God intended them to be on the coast, and to go through the red tape of, you might be disturbing a fish habitat that isn't supposed to be a fish habitat is incredibly frustrating. So, I just, for all of our folks who work on that federal policy stuff, we really just need to push on expediting these types of projects through, especially projects that show public need. And just on another note, I know the mid-Barrett area sediment diversion has been in the news recently with another lawsuit. I don't know if you have all the information today, but we appreciate an update on, just for the board, at a following meeting on that project.
Yeah, I can do that. That suit that you saw in the news is a federal lawsuit that we're not a party to, but happy to give you that update. Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Davis. DNO.
Given the past comments that were just made, I just want to ask as you close out, now that we're at the end of the year, what are some things that we as a board can improve on to help you accomplish goals that are laid out in the annual plans and also move forward with the full master plan? Whether it be continued engagement with federal delegation or taking some initiative or actions here at the board to help direct some of your priorities, whether it be policy related, funding related. What are some things that you think that we can help you improve on?
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. I think y'all obviously do a great job, great stewards for the coast. Really just continue to understand, as actually Mr. Bourgeois said, is that a lot of the work that we do is with either one-time monies or federal appropriations. So any way that we can continue to figure out creative ways, innovative ways to fund the program. The need is pretty great, as we demonstrated in the master plan. And so it's really just working together to find great funding sources that we can build these projects. The work that we do, you hear from Mr. McMillan, it supports the coastal communities that do the work on the coast for our energy sector. And so providing that protection and resiliency is really what we're about. And just finding creative ways to fund that is our challenge. And so I think collectively working together to do that over the next decade plus is really our challenge.
Any other questions or comments? Well, what else I'd like to say is, Governor, thank Governor Jeff Landry. He's really given us an open mic to go ahead and to work with the parish presidents on infrastructure as well as coastal restoration. And he is very on top of it. We update him with the list of all the projects, and he'll call us on weekends and Saturday, Sunday. So he is keeping up with these projects as we go. He's very active as a coastal restoration governor. So I just wanted to say that. You may not see him over here, but he is up to date on all these major projects, including the levees and the floodgates and the coastal restoration itself. And on another note, with the new president being elected, we've had a problem with the PLA on the Corps of Engineers having anything over 35 million required union. So hopefully an executive order will be issued to do away with the executive order that was put in by President Biden, which is costing us on our 35% match a lot more money with CPRA. So we're looking forward to definitely pushing our federal delegation. And if anyone talks to them, I'm sure they'll be well aware of it, that immediately when President Trump takes office, we need to get rid of that PLA order on, that's mandating the court and anything over $35 million has to have union. So that's a huge win in itself for the coast. And with that, I thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Glenn. Okay, next, South Central Louisiana restoration efforts, White Lake Restoration Master Plan, Brian Lazina, CPRA, and Tom Juma, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. And also, after that, we have Wash Island Restoration, Rudy Seminole, CPRA, and Tommy Tuna, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Brian.
Thank you, Chairman Dove. Members, appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I wanted to touch on one thing first. Is I think you heard from Director Leday's presentation the items that we've talked here. CPRA prides itself on the partnerships that we have with each sort of representative here and in who you represent. What we also pride ourselves on is that we are not afraid to reach out to those and say, we don't have the technical expertise, we need guidance on those things. We do that a lot with a lot of, especially the state agencies represented here. And then at the same time, where we can lend our expertise and guidance, we do the same. And so we have the opportunity, myself and Tommy, and then later Rudy, to highlight an example of that, where we are teaming up together to really deliver large projects that benefit the state of Louisiana whole, the resources in Louisiana, and of course the residents in Louisiana. So we'll start with one we're just kicking off, obviously a high priority event here, but this is looking at a comprehensive master plan revision for the White Lake Wetlands Conservation Area, and then we'll touch on some other ongoing work there. But again, it's one of those things where we're able to come together, two state agencies basically for delivering this one project here. So I'll kick it to my counterpart, Mr. Tuma from LDWF, to talk a little bit about White Lake itself.
Yeah, before I get to talk about White Lake, I want to thank the board for allowing us to speak today. It's good to be in this geography with these properties that are neighbors to y'all. So to reiterate what Ryan said, one of the biggest things that we can identify is our weaknesses, our limitations. So bringing partnerships together, using, in this case, CPRA's technical expertise and Royal Engineers expertise to kind of go along with our knowledge of the working property and how to manage this habitat appropriately, and get those ideas together and come out with the most efficient and the best way to manage these properties is going to be advantageous to us all. With that, I would say that, White Lake and Marsh Island are two of the governor's priorities under his administration. It's also one of our strategic priorities within Wildlife Fisheries and Secretary Sheehan. So we're excited to be embarking on this, and we think there's going to be a lot of good that's going to come out from protecting this property, helping out the neighboring landowners, and making these properties exist into the future and hopefully perpetuity. But with that, I'll get started. If you're not familiar with White Lake, it is approximately 72,000 acres. 75% or so, it's actually about 73% of the property is freshwater marsh, and that provides habitat for waterfowl, specifically wintering migratory waterfowl, shorebirds, fish, and alligators. That 53,000 acres or so that is encompassing that freshwater marsh is 6 management units, and they range from 157 acres to approximately 29,000 acres, all right? There's also 7 ag leases totaling 18,144 acres. And if you look at the map, you can see the GIWW, the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway, kind of up at the north section that traverses the property. The ag leases are north of there, and then you see on the, I guess, from the Gulf Coast to the southeast corner of that, that's another ag lease. So all the ag leases are on the northern end of the property, and then south of there are the marsh management units. We say it's a self-sustaining property. What that means is all the activities are funded through self-generated revenue that comes from activities on the property. Those activities include, ag leases. We have some hunting lease. We have alligator egg collection and the revenue that comes from that. We do have some lottery hunts, surface leases, interest on some monies that we have within the White Lake statutory account, alligator harvest and fishing lottery, and there are some smaller things that just are kind of advantageous that maybe not every year. But that's how we generate revenue. Not all the property revenue, if we go after some quipper or we get a knocker grant or something, obviously that revenue does not come from within the property, but we do spend it. For the majority, it is a self-generated property. So, some of the issues that we have, and we'll call them challenges.
Chairman,
This is my first time to present this board, so I'm not calling anybody else, all right?
I'll do it.
All right, I got it. So, a little bit about the property. Those impoundments are all have infrastructure, and when we talk about infrastructure on these management units, we're talking mostly levees, but we're also talking pumps, and we're talking water control structures and canals that we use as transportation to get around the property. But what we're seeing is erosion of impoundment levees. And so this property, was originally owned by Amoco and MVP, and then turned over to the state, and Wildlife Fisheries has the management authority of that. And when we talk about an impoundment letter, some of it is just weathering that comes with age of the property. Some of it is storm damage, and then some of it is erosion from what we call vessel traffic, where the waves lap up against it and erode those levees. The Unit 2, the Caddo, the marsh collapse. So Unit 2 on that map there it was a waterfowl refuge, and it was managed kind of agricultural style. They pump the water off and they oxidize the soil, but they would grow, crops and do moist soil management. Well, in this geography and these habitats, we know that whenever you allow oxygen to hit that soil, you increase the subsidence rate. So what we're looking at is an elevation of -3 for Unit 2 as compared to the rest of the property. So when you're standing on the levee, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the water is 3 foot higher on the Florence Canal side than it is as the soil depth within Unit 2. So a big time issue because we utilize that as a waterfowl refuge and kind of a sanctuary where there's no disturbance in that refuge. So the ability to manage that property is compromised severely when you can't get the water off without pumps, since it is 3 feet lower than the surrounding geography. 22 miles of the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway shoreline is unprotected. We have done some protection on it, but largely there's 22 miles. And if you look at that Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, that is really important to protect not only our properties, but flooding north towards Gaydon. If we don't have shoreline protection and those levees are not there, then that leaves susceptible the private property owners and the town of Gaydon if water was to go north of the Intercoastal Waterway in the event of a storm or a big time rain like we saw in 2016, where you have a lot of flood water hit the landscape. So there's some levee breaches along Unit 2, the Gulf Coast Interworks in Florence Canal that I just referenced. And then we have specific needs of the property, such as Unit 4, which is our smallest unit that I talked about. Unit 5 is the smallest unit, but Unit 4, which I'm sure everybody in this geography is familiar with, the Whooping Crane project. We have an experimental whooping crane population, and that's our release site. So that unit has special habitat requirements and management techniques that we utilize on that property. And then the oil and gas infrastructure, much like most properties in South Louisiana, it creates obstacles for maintenance. There are pipelines and there are lines up on the top of the ground, right? So when we try to manage and try to maintain these levees, if there's a pipeline, we cannot do that. We're afraid of disturbing that. We are working with Texas Petroleum Investment Corporation, TPIC is probably what you locally known as, to work around maybe improving some of that oil and gas infrastructure and maybe rewriting some levees where we don't have to have those barriers. And then the lodge is in need. If you're familiar with the corporate hunts, we have not had the corporate hunts since 2019. 2020, COVID kind of shut the corporate hunts down, and then we had the hurricane and those facilities were damaged. But they were at the end of their useful lifespan. They reached 50 years of age. So when you talk about updates and repairs, what I'm talking about there is no running water to it. So it's well water. It's all galvanized and iron pipe that used in the plumbing. And you're talking about the electrical that was way before they had ground plugs. So you're talking about all the wired and electricity in these updates. Then when you talk about corporate hunts, you do the human dimensions aspect of it from our NACA work. Connectivity is one of the things that people look for most when they're talking about hunting now. And I know I go to get away from people and I leave my phone in my truck, right? But they need connectivity, so we have no wireless internet. So when you talk about updating some of that stuff, making it a more modern facility where people can go out there and reach. One thing that's not on here as a challenge is to utilize this property, since the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway is a federal navigation waterway. We have to employ somebody who has a federal license certification to transport people to get to the south end of the property if it's a member of the public. Well, that means that we have to have at least 2 people certified, because if one of them quits it, we can't be left holding the bag. So we have to have a couple staff members that have that training. Certainly with the workforce and the turnover we have, that's kind of that may be an issue that we always have to have somebody in that training and keep people as competitively. We're just not really competitive with the oil and gas industry from a salary standpoint. So with that, I appreciate that time, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Rosine.
Thanks, Tom. So with that, as I mentioned, the partnerships, what we had was CPRA's really ability to bring a lot of what Tommy said, all of these very diverse things into one kind of looking at a bunch of things at once and plan for the future on that. So what we're assisting with and building a team to do is that, a vision for the conservation area that includes habitat restoration and management, obviously flood protection and shoreline protection. Tommy mentioned not only for the actual unit itself in particular, and the surrounding areas. Water control management, that's so important. Non-consumptive uses is a very large birding activities that go on there. The structures, research, and of course how to generate revenue to keep this thing self-sustaining. So we're looking at kind of primary and secondary goals onto revision. I mentioned the primary goals are sustaining that wetland habitat. This place is incredibly important for those resources that a lot of us like to enjoy. We want to manage the wetland flora and fauna, primarily focusing on waterfowl, but of course fish, birds, and alligators, and also the vegetation that's there. Leased property, mentioned a good chunk of that where it's feasible. We'd like to maintain that leased property as long, especially in some of these cases, that it's compatible with waterfowl management on there. And so I think you have in these areas, and of course Southwest Louisiana and South Central in particular, a lot of agriculture that is also very beneficial to the waterfowl that we have overwintering here in Louisiana. And then of course the secondary goals for revision, basically generating that self-sustaining revenue. That's critically important for all of our agencies to do as we see, we try to diversify income, allowing public access with minimal impact to the wildlife and the habitat there. We want to host education and outreach activities, really promote the activities, the place, as well as the conservation that the department's doing there. And then, of course, facilitate research. We want to look to the future and bring those things better. So schedule the key dates. And as I mentioned, we are coming to you with this sort of ground floor right now. We wanted to highlight this. And of course, we'll be back in the future as we update things. But what we also wanted to do is take a look now, and you can see draft triage projects. So as both of our agencies, if you're familiar with it, we do plan, but we're acting while we're planning as well. And so that's one critical part of these things. So we want to identify projects, sort of those no regrets projects that we can try to get funding for now to construct as we're going through the larger plan. So you see the timing on that, November, December of 2024. Then we'll start to get out into the public with stakeholder interviews, project alternatives, the bigger planning for White Lake, all of those items you see there with the current schedule to deliver that master plan, that revision in October of 2025, so next year about this time. Now, I want to highlight a few things that are also going on in tandem. Again, and I always say this, I'm the chief of planning for CPRA, but I'm also responsible for implementing a lot of these things. And while we plan, we're also implementing as we plan. So you heard some of the challenges that Tommy mentioned for the area, and that's a plan's great if we have something to work with eventually on the future. So there's some items that we've been sort of tackling on the side, helping LDWF look at and prioritize specifically to protecting the features there. So you see shoreline protection and levee stabilization. It's critically important. I mentioned over 20 miles of the GIWW, with most of that above the actual level of what we're talking about here. So breaches are a constant concern in these areas. Same thing with on the White Lake side. So what we're looking at is we're going in and doing some preliminary engineering and design of some of these features. You see here shoreline protection on the GIWW. Again, you got a waterway that's higher than in some cases the managed units that's behind it. So that's obviously a concern. If we lose some of this bank line, we lose those things, right? You can't pump it out to replace it. It's incredibly hard. So we're looking at, okay, what's feasible? Where are sort of the hot spots in some of these areas? Same thing with levee stabilization, so that we're able to manage these particular units on here. And of course, keep outside out and inside in, and actually control that a little bit. And then same thing with issues on the GIWW, critically important, and again, not just for the conservation area, but for the region, is also the shoreline protection along the White Lake area. So what we're doing basically is taking some of those things, really making a prioritization strategy for the department to say, here's kind of the hot spots here where we are with this. what do we need to take then into a more robust and final engineering and design so that we can get these things out and about and hopefully construct it on there. So right now we're doing sort of a feasibility level of prioritization, and you can see the schedule below. I know my head's probably big, so for a lot of you in the back, it's hard to see, but basically we're kicking off that a little earlier in the summer, in July of this year. We'll go through that prioritization and again, do some data collection, but at the same time identify where we want to take these projects to final engineering and design. And then you'll see here with the hopes that through funding, we're able to start on some of these projects in the second quarter of 2026, if not sooner on some of that. So this is a couple examples of where both of the agencies can come together and have needs and expertise, and where we can make a broader, better picture for White Lake in the future on here, but at the same time also act out on the challenges and issues that we have at hand. So with that, we appreciate it. Myself and Mr. Tuma happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Members? Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Tuma and Mr. Lazina. I've really enjoyed the partnership here with CPRA. I feel like the partnership between these two agencies is as strong as it's ever been. And these projects, this one at White Lake, which is one of the governor's priorities, and the next one that we're going to hear about at Marsh Island, that's very close to this area, are going to highlight that partnership that we have going on. And I did have a couple of questions. Tommy, how is the dewatering, I think it's of Unit 2, coming along? I know we had that problem with the T-PIC gas pipeline that we've since repaired, and those generators should be up and running, pumps should be up and running, dewatering that. Where are we at on that?
Yeah, so if you don't know, there was a part of T-PIC's, BP, they retained the mineral rights and the perpetuity for the property when it was transferred to the state. But part of that transfer is they provide natural gas for our pumps that are on the area. So that pipeline had rusted through and had developed a leak, so we could not, with the help of the Louisiana Waterfowl Working Group, we had put 2 new pumps in that unit 3 years ago, I believe. We were not able to dewater that unit because there was a leak in the pipeline. The week of October 17th, as a matter of fact, it was repaired. So we were able to dewater that unit this year. Obviously, we're so late in the growing season, a minimal amount of benefit could come from that, but in the future, well, it doesn't enhance. We didn't have any management capability because I talked about that unit being 3 foot lower than the canal. So it is that pump, those pumps, we have to have those pumps, right? They're going to remain a priority and they're a necessity to dewater that unit. So for those of you who don't know, we did restore that pumping capability. We are able to manage those water levels in that unit to optimum waterfowl depth through this waterfowl season. As before, if with this large amount of rain we've been getting like last week, you would just have a unit that's way above the average preferred depth, which would be somewhere between 6 and 18 inches deep. 18 is on kind of the higher end. We were able to restore manageability, so great question.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. My last question is, when we look at shoreline protection or levee protection of the GIWW, if we don't act on protecting those eroding portions of the levee, what does White Lake property look like into the future?
If we do not act on that, it is essentially White Lake, not White Lake property. It is essentially White Lake. So when we talk about it, it will be permanently inundated and it will be open water. So it is, it's imperative that if we want to manage the property and we want to provide waterfowl habitat from the standpoint of what we call preferred waterfowl habitat, not just submerged water vegetation, it's mandatory that it's imperative that we protect this infrastructure so we can manage this property. And this is the first step. When we talk about what our plans are for White Lake, because I'm new responsibility since July, what we're talking about is historically been passively managed. What we're going to try to do is protect the property. We'll try to develop an infrastructure where we can actively manage this property and not just passively manage it, because then we're going from a 20% to an 80 to 100%. That's our goal, right? If we're going to manage it, we're going to do it right. We're going to manage it actively. If not, it's going to be just open water and part of White Lake. So, thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate your work on this.
Yes, Mr. Bill O'Donnell.
Yes, sir.
A quick question, how long does it take to de-water Unit 2?
It depends on the water depth, but when you talk about pumps that are moving somewhere 10,000 gallons per minute, you know, you can do it pretty fast. Unit 2, I don't remember the acreage of it, it's about, I want to say it's about 4,000 acres, something like that. So, you know, you would, to de-water it, so what we would do, if you think of that marsh, it's not mineral soil like we're on today, it's more organic matter. It's like a sponge, right? It hydrates and dehydrates. We would bring it down to a level to where you're not exposing the organic matter. But if it was a foot deep, you know, a couple weeks, you could get the water off. Just, there's a lot of variables there, but that's a rough guess. Right.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Mr. Davis.
On the oil and gas infrastructure and the obstacles, is it just pipelines? Are we looking at active leases, open wells?
Well, for the most part, it's the infrastructure that I was referencing was exposed pipelines. And when they're sitting on top of the ground, that prohibits management activities. We like to do marsh burns. You can't do that if there's an exposed pipeline, right? If there is a breach, you can't dig around them. You can't get material. You have to barge the material in, and that is not our infrastructure. So we don't cover their pipeline. So there's a lot of management issues. Orphan wells, not so much. It's not an issue. But what I'm referencing is the exposed pipelines create an infrastructure issue, but they also create a barrier to what some of our management goals and activities are.
Just to get a gauge of how important this area is, do you have an estimate on the wintering population of the migratory?
No, sir, I don't, and I'm sorry. I could go back, so we fly our aerial surveys, so I could get you some long-term data, and I can certainly provide the board that. Waterfowl populations are so dynamic. I think this year it's probably the lowest continental population in the last decade for sure. There's a lot of issues with habitat in Louisiana. And look, I'm a farmer, all right? My family had a family farm. There's a lot of land use change in this area. You know, when you talk about historical rice properties moving to sugarcane, and that's a private property issue, and they have the right to do that. But all those things impact the amount of waterfowl that we have on the landscape. And so what we need to do is, when those private properties, when that land use happens, we need to make sure that our public lands are propping up their management activities, so we'll never go back to the days of the glory days. What we can do is improve our activities, improve our management capabilities, and offset that and make that change and make those effects as I guess more palatable to the public and our department.
Well, I spent my youth, majority of duck hunting on the chain-rail team, and I can tell you, post Rita dramatically changed the landscape of that entire area. It had a huge impact on the birds that rested there.
Right.
But I was thinking, with this working, you know, those Rockefeller, Rainy, White Lake, it's all right there within a pretty close proximity. I would imagine that the sustainability of those three locations would have a huge impact on the migratory population.
Absolutely, and that's why we have the properties. And one of the things, and I'll get into some of the departments deal is what we did was, I'm the administrator of Habitat Stewardship Program. So in the past, we have had our land management group kind of divided between the Wildlife Division and the CNR Division. So what this administration or Governor Landry has done is we put all that land management under one person, so it's all under me. So we can more effectively manage our properties. We can utilize our staff more efficiently. We can utilize our equipment more efficiently. We can have more ideas and we can lean on one another. We're going to take staff from Rockefeller. We'll take staff from Marsh Island and State Wildlife. And we're going to use those people interchangeably because all those people have management experience and they have ideas and they have ways they can improve these things. And we're not going to operate in silos anymore. We're going to operate and we're going to look towards responsible management of these public resources. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, with that, I thank you, Brian, and Brian's team does a great job, and next, Rudy Seminoles, and also Tommy Tuma, and I want to apologize to the audience about my music. I really not my music, I don't know where that song came from. My type of country music is older than that one, so I do apologize, I don't know why it came on. Mr. Seminoles.
Thank you, Chair. happy to present today. I'm looking forward to the song you played for me, so.
That'll be Hank Williams.
Before Rudy starts, I want to say a couple things about how important this partnership has been. It's been refreshing to get a lot of different people and a lot of different ideas. In this case, in the room, but also on the boat, we've had several site visits with myself and our staff, and where we can exchange ideas, where we can look at these sites, and we can, when you lay eyes on them and you're on a boat and you're looking at them, you can talk about things you've done in the past, and you can see how they've affected the landscape. And you can talk about things where it's just a realization when we talk about degraded marsh, especially on some of the maps, and you look at it, it looks different when you're looking at it from a boat, right? When you're on the site and you're looking at it, it brings it to, it's real, it's not just a map. So, been really good to go out with CPRA and their staff on the boats and look at these sites. But I would be irresponsible if I didn't acknowledge the Russell Sage Foundation, who donated Marsh Island to the department. I actually had lunch with the Russell Sage Foundation, a working lunch with the Russell Sage Foundation yesterday to talk about the things that we're going to talk about today, but also some other activities that the Wildlife and Fisheries staff have been doing. And so they're very appreciative. They're still an active partner. You know, they're kind of they're policing the deed of donation to make sure that Wildlife and Fisheries is carrying out all the responsibilities and requirements of that deed of donation. So we enjoy their partnership with them. We enjoy our partnership with CPRA, but I want to make sure that I acknowledge them at this board that without the Russell Sage Foundation, we wouldn't even have Marsh Island. So this will be a good conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Rudy Semino, CPRA Chief of Engineering. I'm happy to present to you Marsh Island, give you a little background on Marsh Island, some of the efforts that have taken place there and currently taking place, as well as our look at the future and some of the things we're looking to deliver in the next several years. So I think a lot of us are pretty familiar with Marsh Island. It's a massive piece of land that separates Vermilion Bay and West Coast Launch Lake from the Gulf of Mexico. About 30 miles directly due south of where we sit today is Marsh Island. You see it on the left there. As Tommy mentioned, it was deeded to the state in 1920 and it's been managed by Wildlife and Fisheries. When it was originally deeded, it was 76,000 acres. As you can see, it's probably even less than 71,000 acres that we have there. So we are losing land on Marsh Island. You can see crucial habitat for waterfowl, birds, as well as many other fishery species, alligators, fur bearers. But just looking at that bottom left picture, you can see how critical that landmass is to the northern shores of Vermilion Bay and West Coast Launch Bay, and even further to the east. So it's important that we sustain this piece of our state from a habitat standpoint, from an ecological standpoint, but also from how the Gulf of Mexico interacts with the shoreline in south central Louisiana. So we'll go through a few slides on some of the work that's been accomplished previously, and you'll notice that we've had a lot of success with what we've done here previously. So unlike what Ryan where we're kind of looking at a few projects, we have a lot of that figured out already at Marsh Island because we've been pretty successful in doing some of the things. So it's going to be a lot of the same things because the projects have performed very well. We'll go all the way back to the early 2000s and the Equipper program, a very early Equipper project, T14, Marsh Island Hydrologic Restoration Project. A combination of some canal closures on the northeastern part of Marsh Island, you see on the left inset map there, as well as some shoreline protection on that eastern side as well. A lot of these structures are still there today and operating quite fine. Obviously, this is a pretty old project, but given the location of it on the island, and really it's a pretty sustainable place in terms of soil conditions, these projects have held up quite well. Fast forward to the 2010 timeframe, another Equipper project, we were able to design a project that put a dredge right there in the bay, and we created about 362 acres of marsh, and we actually nourished, which meant we kind of let the pipe flow into the marsh for another 665 acres. So you can see the picture there on the far right. The creation component is at the top of the picture. That nourishment component is there, kind of flowing out into the south. You can see the middle picture has that field profile that you can see so well with the grade stick. That area we're taking a look at in the middle picture was open water by about 1.5 to 2 feet in the dredge slurry pipeline pumping the mud in there. Great project. I was fortunate enough to be a member of the engineering team back when I was a much younger man. Sit here to see that this project is still performing well, and hopefully we can do a little bit more of this on Marsh Island. A lot of local efforts, Iberia Parish CIAP projects have taken place, terraces. Once again, because of the pretty good soil profile and the strength profile of these soils, we've been quite successful with building earthen terraces here. These terraces provide benefits from a wave fetch standpoint, so prevent erosion in certain parts of the island, as well as habitat. You can see the birds and gulls hatching there on the right. Two terrace projects took place with parish-led CIAP funds. You can see the cost there, both completed in the 2013 timeframe. And then there's a variety of marsh management units that wildlife and fisheries staff operate as we speak today. These involve multiple water control structures, those fixed crescent variables, so some passive and not in more active management of water into the marsh island. A lot of this has been incredibly successful, getting some of that water out of the marsh, allowing the control of water levels in there. You can see a recently refurbished structure at the big impoundment there on the right. So Wildlife Fisheries continues to operate and maintain these structures and have good success in doing so. So moving forward, what do we look at today? First and foremost, the master plan has identified, 2023 master plan and previous versions has identified Marsh Island as a critically important component of our 50-year plan. And you can see here, we do have a project that looks to create new wetlands, restore degraded wetlands, and prevent shoreline erosion. So using the information from the master plan, we developed a scope to put together a design team to kind of take a look at not so much a planning effort, but more of a conceptual design effort. There's no identified construction funds for a lot of this work as we speak, but we feel that if we can advance the design to the conceptual level, that helps us leverage existing funds and obtain more funds to put some of these projects on the ground. So this scope really involves looking at what's been done in the past. There is a lot of data from wildlife and fisheries and some of the projects that we've designed and constructed on the island, as well as some limited data collection to help inform some of these conceptual designs. And then moving forward, we will visit and coordinate with wildlife and fisheries. These folks know this island better than anybody. We definitely want a maximum amount of input from the agency as to where and how we deliver these projects. Develop the conceptual designs, get into some estimated quantities, and then if we're going to ask for money, we need to have a plan, come up with those construction costs to get a feel for how much money needs to be obtained to construct these. So you can see there the next steps beyond this phase would be to identify the best projects and advance in the full design. Ultimately, the current scope that we've just kicked off, we plan to have complete in the 6 to 9 month time frame. So we're looking at summer of next year, maybe fall of next year. We should have this phase complete, and then we will be looking to see where we go next with this suite of preliminary design projects. Just to kind of put it on the map, this is one kind of option as to where we may look to put some projects on the ground here. Obviously, you see the big blue polygon that's hatched on the bottom right. That's a good area that's been identified for marsh creation. Shoreline protection, we feel right now that eastern and southeastern component of Marsh Island has the highest erosion rates and is better suited for shoreline protection. And of course, looking at the success of the earthen terraces that have been constructed there, you see some areas in some of those open water ponds that would be ideal for earthen terraces. This is just kind of one concept. Obviously, we're going to fully develop this, and we look forward to reporting back to the board as we fully more develop some of these designs and get some input here. I think that's my last slide. Tom, unless you have anything else to say, we'll open it up to questions.
Any questions, comments?
Yes, Mr. Tuma, you hit it spot on. When you go out there and you look at this island, it is in bad shape. It looks like decaying marsh. It looks very bad. You can go around all sides of the island and you can see the former control structures that are 100 yards into the water where they used to control the headway of waterways that went into the inland portions of the island. Do you have an idea of the rate of subsidence on this island, size that it was donated, the size when it was donated, the size of the island now?
We have some historical data, some aerial photos where we can look at where the property boundaries were, and even some public some features that were there. But yeah, if you're standing, if we go back to, if I go back to the picture of this picture right here where we're talking about the, this is the old, I went the wrong way. The old camp, compound right here. The boundary, you see how close it is, it was half mile out, at least a half mile out when it was donated, and that's probably a very conservative estimate. So when we talk about 76,000 acres, that 71,000 acres is probably more around the 68,000 acres. But, you know, when you look at Marsh Island historically, they were in cattle on it. There was fur. And so what you're talking about is you actually did have some mineral soil that was available on Marsh Island. Now it's degraded marsh. And so one of the things that is kind of a misconception amongst the public is that it's getting saltier. Well, it did last year because we were in a historic drought, so the salt water was allowed to get in there. It actually is getting a little fresher. And so, but you know, you have those ebbs and flows in that dynamic system. That's harder on a habitat than when it's just static, right? So that's where we're seeing the degraded marsh. We talk about, obviously, I don't need to school this board on, you know, freshwater diversions and the lack of those sediment influence. That's really what's having an effect on us. Is we talk about we don't have those freshwater influence, we don't have that nutrient reload. It's sinking. So Andy and I, we're actually working with the USGS and LSU to kind of develop a research project. Just actually have to review it. And what we're going to look at is we're going to do soil cores in cooperation with some of the stuff we're going to do, and we can look at our historical past activities, and we can say which one of these activities increased subsidence and which slow it down, what was most beneficial. We can use that data and kind of steer us to management techniques that we need to stay away from on this property. Because every site does not react the same, right? So we can kind of tailor a management plan that is beneficial most. But yeah, so when we look at it, the property is still 68,000 acres, but you have to remember, just because the property is there doesn't mean it's not in remotely the same shape. If we when we received Marsh Island, if we called that habitat today, we're dang near death right now. That's how much it's degraded. So that's the reason why we're coming to this board, talking about the things we need to do, the marsh nourishment, the marsh creation, the terracing, so we can build this property back up and manage our property to where we start. If we're looking at dredge field, or we're looking at some other techniques that allow us to kind of restore some of this elevation. That's what our goal is. So I don't know if that answered your question, and I know it's a long answer, but I want to be thorough in my response.
That's perfect, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boswell. Yes, sir.
I mean, just to echo a little bit, I'm extremely excited to see some, more attention being paid to Marsh Island. I'm a lifelong resident of Liberia Parish, grew up fishing out of Symbol Point with me and Bates. I can tell you in my, 30 plus years of, experience how much has changed. My father-in-law's retired wild fishery agent, 30-something years, Liberia for me. His father was a trapper on the island, so he's probably 50 plus years of experience on Marsh Island. And he would tell me stories how Diamond Reef was 6 or 8 foot out of the water at one time. Just how many reefs they had, and of old artesian wells that they're on the island in places. And just to watch him talk about how magnificent that place used to be compared to what it is now. I have 2 young boys, 12-year-old and a 5-year-old, that hopefully, their kids will be able to, enjoy what I grew up, going out the first cold snap and catching, just, champagne baskets of shrimp, 10 pounds. But I remember going out there and what we call the big dam, maybe the glory dam, both of them, but, catching just, number 1 grade crabs, and you just don't see that much anymore. Because I imagine it's a massive estuary for, redfish, speckled trout, flounder, and then the crabs too. And, and the amount of crab traps you see in Mayan Bay today versus 20, 30 years ago is significant. So in my opinion, those crabs have nowhere to go to escape the pressure besides the island. So I'm really excited to see, any of this take form. And being from Liberia Parish and representing Liberia Parish, the main area on this board, anything I can do to provide assistance, I don't know what help I can be, but I'm at your disposal.
Yeah, and I thank you. Look, and I made some statements, and I don't want to throw any shade or anything towards past staff or anybody who's been involved with Marsh Island. We don't have a knowledge issue. I think one of the misconceptions is Wildlife and Fisheries is mismanaged, probably don't know what they're doing. I think we have all the knowledge and we know what to do. Much like everybody else in this room, we have a funding issue. It costs a lot of money to have these coastal properties and to manage them correctly in perpetuity. So education and outreach, that's a big thing where our department's talking about. We need to talk about some of the things. And a lot of the conversations are, I don't remember who said it, but like, Marsh Island, some of the stuff that we're trying to do for winter waterfowl, that's exclusive when you talk about national marine fishery and some of these saltwater fishing, when you're trying to manage this and fish passes, and that's something that we have to, as a group, we have to collect, what do we want? What's our priority here? So I look forward to continue the conversation. I appreciate the offer.
And I understand, I'm not placing my own, and, I understand that any department goes, it's in 4 to 8 year cycles, because one governor or administration, it's at the top of the list. The next one may be mid, so I understand that, you guys can only do what, what you're, I guess, sending the direction to do. So I understand.
Look, it's imperative, and I think everybody in this room knows, Rudy pointed it out. If this is not here, this is not here.
Absolutely.
I think we all need to acknowledge that, which is why, from a resource management standpoint, this is super important for wildlife because we're the owners of that property. We also understand that it affects all these people. Highway 9 is going to be beachfront if we have no Marsh Island. We need to realize that.
Well, I can tell you, growing up, coming in Burial Island right here, it was nothing to see huge herds of deer, whitetail, impressive bucks and whatnot, and they would just sit there and watch you go by.
Right.
You don't see that.
We have a very small deer population. There's some impacts from feral hogs. I mean, for those who don't know, we actually we trapped 125 feral hogs this year on Marsh Island. Other than the erosion and subsidence, it's probably our biggest impact on Marsh Island. So we've got a lot of good things going on. I think we've got a lot of momentum. We've got focused delivery, and that's what's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Y'all drug the debate a little bit too close. I'll take a swipe at it. I'm ecstatic that you guys are spending a little time, particularly CPRA, focusing on this region because it gets back at a point I tried to make a little earlier. At least in my experience, paying attention to RPT meetings through the CPRA program, this area has a clear, obvious area of need and scores terribly as it evolves through the process. So this area, I think, is symptomatic of some of the challenges that program faces. So I had to take another bite at the apple, but we have an opportunity here to restore this place. But as you talked about, Mr. Toon, with the funding challenges, it's almost out of consideration in the way that process has evolved. So I'll stop there.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you all very much, Rudy and Tommy. Thank y'all for everything y'all do.
Thank you.
Next, I'll get to Louisiana Structural Flood Protection and Resiliency Efforts. Linda D. Jr. and Ron Lazina. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairman Dove. Happy to be back up here with Mr. Lazina. This effort we want to talk to you about today is really critical, and so I'm going to kick it off and then turn it over to Brian. But what I wanted to tell the board today and everybody here is that, all of the work that we do on the flood risk reduction, hurricane protection, resiliency side is really a combination of state, federal, and local efforts. And so what you're going to see is kind of that same theme. So obviously, we've got the structural protection side where we're building levees, floodgate pump stations. We have the non-structural stuff we talked about where we're elevating homes. And it really takes both of those types of efforts to protect our coastal communities. But then when we look at who's implementing this project, it takes all levels of government. And so we're going to kind of showcase that to you today. In South Central Louisiana, we have that federal home elevation program that we're hopefully kicking off soon, just like in Southwest. But we've also got the Southwest Coastal overarching authorization on the resiliency side. And then the non-federal, state-led hurricane protection efforts that we're going to talk to you about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lazina and let him kind of kick this off.
So as Glenn mentioned, we'll start with a little bit here, and obviously, as we've seen in previous years, it's not just the state's coastal program; it's a life-saving coastal program. Over 2 million people live within 50 miles of Louisiana's coast, and I think we've seen successes from what we've done already, be it the Morganza to the Gulf or Hydra system, that have been tested and have passed overwhelmingly, and we've seen that resistance and resilience added to these communities to be able to do that. So, but it's not just one thing. We say structural protection, we say restoration, but the agency as a whole looks at an integrated approach, and you often hear that integrated protection and restoration. But this shot from the 23 Coastal Master Plan kind of highlights that dramatically. It might be hydrologic restoration in the west to make sure that we're keeping those wetlands safe. It's marsh creation. Mr. Semino and Mr. Tuma were mentioning some of the ideas around Marsh Island. You see that represented. Areas south of White Lake represented. Rainy, again, was mentioned, some of those areas. And then also what you'll see in the state coastal master plan, unfortunately not in the federal plan, is a system of structural protection right there that we propose on the screen there. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and some other highlight some items as well. So first, just wanted to throw out a few of the ongoing items. Mr. Lede mentioned non-structural protection specifically, and this is the one in the Southwest. So we had the opportunity for 2 large-scale feasibility studies for both Southwest Louisiana and South Central Louisiana to really look at protection and restoration of the coast. Unfortunately, there was no structural protection in the federal interest for these areas. But what we did have was an overwhelming authorization for non-structural protection in these. So you saw a little earlier the kickoff for the Southwest Coastal effort. It's a very large effort. We hope to elevate about 1,000 homes with what we have on hand. We're kicking off the first 18 here with the groundbreaking. And so that represents currently between state as a 35% match and the federal government about a $400 million investment into Southwest Louisiana. But as you can see, we've got a ways to go to protect all of those 3,400 residences and the non-residential and warehouses as well. But again, another line of defense that we're able to do and get these folks out of harm's way. One important thing is for all of these, and I get this a lot from constituents, is that it's not just looking at current risk that you have, but risk that you have well into the future. So the homes are getting elevated above future risk, not just risk today, but what you see on there, that 2075, 100-year base flood elevation. So a lot of these homes may or may not be at risk. They may not think they are, but we can get them out of future damage. Same kind of effort was done in here in South Central coastal Louisiana. Again, the federal investment or the federal interest was determined to be non-structural, but again, a large non-structural effort. So the current plan is authorized would be about 1,800 residences, 200 commercial, 32 public, and then a warehouse as well. We were fortunate on this to get some of the methods changed for this, to say it's not just dry flood proofing, but also the addition of some other items so that these buildings could flood, but equipment's raised out of harm's way, or some critical infrastructure is raised out of harm's way. Again, to get the public back working, to get these places back working, so that we can proceed there, not to stop the water, but to be resilient against those impacts. But the main part of some of this is we wanted to talk a little bit about structural protection in here, and just where we're going as the agency and trying to work with some of the local entities. So we're in the midst right now of the 2029 master plan. It seems like every time I talk to the board, we're moving this further along, but we start this process before the current plan is even at the state legislature. So right now we're into the 2029 coastal master plan. And what we do as a part of the planning process, obviously we take high-level looks across coastal Louisiana and say what's going to benefit the residents. We use a system of of modeling. We look at damage assessments. We look at how the land's going to change, future storms, all that. But at some point, we take a deeper dive on some of these things, and we want to be able to refine that. So when the next plan comes along, we have a much better look than we can at the 100,000 foot level. So we do that by interacting with local flood protection entities, local residents, local parish governments, that sort of thing, to be able to refine those plans and hopefully carry those forward. The other thing that's important about that is we want to take a regional look at this. So obviously we recognize that as parishes, you have constituents there and funding that keeps certain things at the parish level. But what we're going to talk a little about there is some of these are systems. They're not just parish protection. They are regional approaches, regional systems to do that for structural protection. And that's where CPRA often can come in and help kind of keep that process along. So what you'll see a lot from us is not just what the damage sort of reduced at the parish level would be, and so we can go look for funding at this and say, what's the reduction at a regional level, which in most cases is very large, to be able to tie that system together instead of an individual project. What we also do is go out there and want to be able to highlight what the value of that structural protection is. So I mentioned this was not a federal component. It didn't hit the magic 1-to-1 benefit cost ratio. Obviously, the state of Louisiana looks at benefits a little bit different and what that means to the residents. But just one example here is what you can see, and looking at these model outputs is basically the difference between flood depths with and without that structural protection. So obviously, it's hard to see, I get that, but the brown is good. It means that those are 6 to 9 foot in some cases or greater reduction in depths with a 50-year or 100-year storm 50 years into the future on there. So obviously the difference, if you take home anything, just that bright line of a difference in color and what that means for residents of the area on there to be able to do that. So we'll start with kind of where we are. CPRA, kind of what we're bringing to the table here. And first, just looking at it in sections, is the Abbeville and vicinity levy in the state's master plan, obviously bringing important protection to Vermilion Parish on there. And this is sort of a start. This was in the master plan. It's feasibility at best level. We recognize that. A lot of the residents say, well, we want opportunities maybe to discuss those lines. It's black and white on the map. It is not black and white in real life. Obviously, I mentioned the master plan takes that 100,000 foot look at the world. But what we're really saying is there is benefit to structural protection in this area. It is beneficial to do that. So what we're doing now is working with Vermilion Parish and several entities to take a look at what the Vermilion Parish brand new coastal master plan has. We're working with the Soil and Water Conservation District there and others to say, okay, what best benefits Vermilion Parish? How can we look at this, again, on behalf of the parish, as you'll see, to tie in to the system as a whole on there. So this is an initiative we're kicking off to try and bring some of these things along so that we can better position the system as a whole, but also the state's efforts to construct here, to understand and construct this particular feature. Next is the Iberia and St. Mary upland levee. So a little bit different situation. Some great work has been done by the parishes, specifically Iberia. We'll touch on that a little bit towards the overall goal of protection for the parish. But again, they also realize that this is a regional system and will be a part in that discussion, as will St. Mary, as we're touching on later, to ensure that we're doing this. When we're building these features, they have not only independent benefit, but independent or benefit to the entire region. So here you see the Iberia Parish Flood Protection System as proposed and as ongoing. We're happy to be a part of the design and construction of that. You can see here with the funding up there with some of those features. We'll go through and just show a couple. Director Lede had already shown a few of those, but 2 projects that have been recently completed, the Jefferson Canal North, Jefferson Canal South. You can see some of those control structures right there. As was mentioned, some projects that are in engineering and design. Here are some of those important important pump stations and water control structures and cutoffs. We won't go into the specs on each, but obviously very important. Looking on engineering and design completion soon on those. And then two of the really important projects we're beginning design on, and that's the Commercial Canal and Delcom Canal. Obviously, we can do all kinds of things, build all kinds of structures, but if we have major conduits open, especially major conduits that may be between two of these structures, we're sort of doing that for naught. And obviously, we're seeing saltwater intrusion impacts in a lot of areas, especially important agricultural interest and of course the storm surge interest as well. So these are beginning design now with those barge gates and pumping stations, and really excited to see that go through. And then lastly is the Franklin and vicinity. So I mentioned we're kind of kicking off in Vermilion. Iberia's got a good chunk going and done, and we're proud of that. Well, part of the system is already done here with St. Mary Parish when you look at the Franklin and vicinity. So this one's a little bit different. If you read through the state master plan, what you'll actually see is improvements, future improvements to that, to the federal side and some of the state system and local system that's over there, but then the extension to the west of this to tie it into more that regional system. And so that's what you see proposed in the state's master plan. But again, folks aren't sitting back and not doing anything. There's a lot of work ongoing. You kind of see the difference between the orange and the green and blue. I know that's very difficult to see there, but more federal and local systems, and the state going to the west. The parish, CPRA, other partners are putting in a lot of effort to build that resilience and protection into the system here, but also with the idea of tying it in again to a larger sort of regional approach. However, and I say this all the time, it's great, there's planning, but we don't just sit here and wait on some of that and do. So one of the other things Glenn mentioned was part of Southwest Coastal also had an ecosystem restoration component. So there's marsh creation involved, there's shoreline protection involved, and we've been fortunate enough, thankfully, through Congressman Higgins' office and others, to be able to receive funding to do just that in some of these areas here with shoreline protection features specifically in that. So what you see here is we're working towards engineering and design and going to construction, keeping those Gulf shoreline protection going, moving west of where we are, adding a lot of great work onto the Rockefeller system. We have a lot of this designed already, which is great. So we're going in and updating surveys, updating those designs. Just as important, that work is also creditable against the 35% cost share we have on these other federal projects. So every home lifted, every land acre restored, we have a 35% share of. And so what we're spending here represents a portion of that, and that's great. Currently, it's a $30 million federal investment. We look to hopefully have about a $40 million investment soon. And of course, success breeds success, and we're hopeful that this keeps on going as a project, and we still see that federal investment. Of course, we'll match it with the state and keep those going. And then other issues was mentioned earlier, Rainy and State Wildlife Refuge. Mr. Corva mentions work in this area. And so what we're doing now and with partners is also engineering and design some of those features that are sort of have that dual benefit. So shoreline protection, earthen terraces, marsh creation. We've been doing this with state surplus funding, trying to move this design forward so we can get it to a fundable and constructible position on there, and obviously very important to the system itself. So talking fast, I know we're running there. Again, highlighting partnerships, highlighting where CPRA hopefully can be effective and beneficial in bringing several groups together, in this case, 3 parishes, and all the associated agencies and groups to really work towards a regional approach, a regional system that even adds to what we're doing already in this area for the residents of South Central and Southwest Louisiana. So I know we'll be happy to take any questions today.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Yes, Mr. Colville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't mean to bogart the floor here, but just a couple of items, I guess, on your 4th slide. It appeared, at the very beginning, there were not very many shoreline stabilization features in that Bay Area. You can stop anywhere, it doesn't matter.
Or is it the master plan?
Master plan.
Okay.
I see you have it labeled in the legend, but it seems to have escaped the map. Perhaps there's some places that are appropriate for some shoreline stabilization consideration. One in particular, that Franklin vicinity protection levee. The bay is knocking on the door of that levee. I'm very familiar with that area. And coincidentally, on the Clipper bandwagon, there was a Clipper project proposed there. It got deauthorized. And the reason is because of flow line issues and unsuitable soils to stack up rocks. However, looking at the success that Wildlife and Fisheries has had with their lightweight aggregate, maybe, we've evolved. That thing was proposed in Clipper's infancy. I think you guys have learned a tremendous amount, and the technology has advanced, and the engineering and design has advanced significantly. I would love for you guys to at least consider, particularly where that levee portion is, that protection levee is, because before you know it, the bay is going to be laughing at the levee. I know it's riddled with challenges there, particularly in the pipeline world. However, I think the challenges it faced probably 20, 25 years ago, good gracious, I'm getting old, but, and now I think you're gonna have a whole new atmosphere and a new playing field with some of those pipeline interests in wanting to be viewed upon positively as a restoration supporter, instead of, coming across my pipeline even on a dare kind of deal. So I think there might be some new opportunity out there, but it's the elephant in the room as far as that protection system is. And before you know it, it's going to be laughing at the foot of that protection line.
So appreciate the comment, Chad. I will say for the coastal master plan, shoreline protection, bank stabilization, those kinds of things are treated programmatically. Yeah, so it's impossible to go on a statewide area and put, we could draw a line everywhere on there.
Feel better if it was
Yeah.
on there.
Well, I'm 2029, just draw a red line everywhere, and we'll go from there. But
Good plan.
because it's all consistent, right? So yeah, no problem. Incorporate a line, but and so. Well, I might have to add money to the $50 million plan then if it's a corporate autograph. But obviously that's something we look for input on as well from locals, and obviously it is programmatic, it is consistent. We do a lot of that work, but it is so you won't see it on the map. But we recognize the need for that. So thanks. Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? David?
Thank you. Just want to commend y'all on the adjustment in finding some non-structural components that can be workable. I know that's been somewhat of a challenge. The fight between grid and grid infrastructure at the federal level doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. So thank y'all for being creative and making sure that we're moving forward with this. I think it's slide 6 on Southwest Coastal non-structural. You have at the bottom total cost is $1.6 billion at FY22 levels. How confident are you?
This is slide 6, Dustin. So we'll see. I think it's pretty good. There was a conservative estimate on there, but I think we'll have a better idea once we get into not only the pilot program here, but this first chunk. Unfortunately, we have some ideas, but not at scale. And for the Corps, this is a huge, when I say huge, big time national effort, but we're the point. We're the number ones on this. So I think we'll see that refined, but obviously the commitment is there on the federal side. So we're going to work what we got. But
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm glad you brought that up because, when you look at federal projects from the Corps' perspective, a lot of times they under-promise, over-deliver, and in many ways have a larger cost associated with the project. So the pilot program is going to be incredibly important moving forward, just to show that this can be done cheaper and more efficiently and quicker. But then also, moving forward, very interested in working on ways that we can help with that DCR issue, especially when we're talking about structural improvements, because I think at the end of the day, the construction costs, the amount of steel needed or concrete, the way that those prices fluctuate can have a significant impact, but at the end of the life of the project, the benefits that are there are not fully captured. I think you see that with navigation projects where they only take in the amount of money or revenue raised from tows moving through a lock system or on a waterway without incorporating the amount of wetlands restored or waterfowl habitat created. So if there's any way that we as a board can help push the Corps and Congress to start including a little bit more into their BCR to get a better understanding of the actual benefits and not necessarily the immediate benefits of that project, but the ancillary benefits on the communities and the economy, welcome that opportunity at any point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dowd.
Yes, sir. And we're about ready to talk about the Chapel National Plan. And a great concern to St. Mary Parish is always riverine flooding. And we are seeing now with the rising tide, the backwater flooding being conditions that are going both to the east and to the west of the Chapel Road. As you know, we put some protection in on the east side by the shading structure, but on the west side, we have seen effect. We are studying that now. We have a report that we're going to look at tomorrow at the St. Mary Levy District meeting. And there's great concern now about rising tide, about backwater flooding, and really this is not, storm protection that we basically are talking about right now, but this is riverine protection. And it's a real thing for St. Mary Parish and the Chapel area.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dowd. That's a great point. Certainly, we understand that need. One of the things that we'll hopefully hear from in the January meeting, the Corps will come and talk about the Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Study that they're doing. That's an important thing that we brought up to them in that effort. And so, Brian and his team will obviously address it in the Atchafalaya Basin Master Plan. But we certainly want to continue to talk to the Corps about it as they move forward, what we call the LMR comp. And we'll ask them to present to the board in January. We can talk about it then as well.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because we cannot take more than 30% of that water that we're taking right now. And if the Morganza spillway is going to be opened up more than we've seen it in the past, 1973 and 2011. If the Morganza spillways can be open every year, this whole area is going to be inundated with river water. So, we need to protect that area from more than that 30% of water that we potentially could get through this study. Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that study.
Yeah, so we have CPRA, Brian and I sit as the state's designee on that study. So we continuously bring up the flexibility around Morganza, but also, like you mentioned, backwater flooding in the lower Atchafalaya. So it's something that we continuously bring up and will continue to do over the next several years.
A different subject, but good time to bring it up and talk a little bit and put it on the table.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Joe, on the elevations, did y'all mention the timeline, how long they wanted to take to get that up? All 3,300, 400 homes lifted?
Yeah, so the first 18 are starting now.
Yeah.
After that, they're immediately moving into the next 800 to 1,000. Beyond there, the schedule is really dependent upon the congressional appropriations. So how quickly can we get funds to the Corps to continue that? So right now, what's on the table is the first 1,000, essentially.
Thanks.
Yep.
It is voluntary.
It is.
Okay.
100%.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Thank you all very much, and I think you're still next.
I kind of went for the technical hat trick here, but
Yes. State Atchafalaya Master Plan, Brian Levine and CPRA, and Dave Green, CPRA.
thank you, Chairman Dove and members. You won't have to hear too much from me on this one. I just wanted to make a few comments before the expert, Ms. Green, takes over from that. One is I wanted to set a little bit, and you've heard me and the team come up here before and talk about our interest in the Atchafalaya, sort of where we are. And you've heard me say how important it is nationally as well as locally. But this is a step that we're taking in that direction really to show what that means. So obviously we put a lot of time and effort into the state's coastal master plan, 6 years to be exact, and 5 and some change worth of effort. And this is really us putting the Atchafalaya system on that same sort of footing. Instead of just an appendix to an annual plan somewhere, we are taking a master plan, state master plan size dive into prioritizing what the state and its partners do in the Atchafalaya area. Some other things you're going to see, and Glenn mentioned already, you see boat ramps and access points. That's a little bit different than we do in some areas, but it's so important for people to get out, enjoy this area, and again, tell that story of how important this is. Probably said this 1,000 times, this should be an Everglades, this should be a Chesapeake Bay program, not just the state's Atchafalaya Basin program. And last, any of these projects are a lot. They're a lot of effort. There are a lot of going out to the public because that's where the expertise is. There are a lot of behind the scenes meetings. And so I want to thank specifically Ms. Green and the staff of that. We just finished 4 public meetings. You know, you got to travel to where these folks are. That's what we do, as well as webinars. I want to thank the team that we have together supporting us with Royal and Emergent Method. And just as importantly, this comes with a lot of technical expertise from your representatives and the members of the state agencies that do that. So again, for me, thank you for the opportunity here, and I'll turn it over to Paige.
Thank you. As Mr. Lissima said, we're very excited to present this plan to you. We're just kicking off. This is year 1 of a 4-year effort. We'll get into a little bit of the background information on the basin, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, and then we'll talk about some of the planning that's already been done in the past before moving into our plan development process and then project solicitation, which we're currently in an open project solicitation period. And I'll get into that a little bit, and then I'll give you some time for questions. So this slide, you can read through it. It's just some of the Atchafalaya system highlights, but this is to really drive home the fact that the Atchafalaya Basin is inherently important, not only to Louisiana, but on a national level. One of the major things that you'll see on here is that the basin is responsible for an estimated average annual commercial harvest of nearly 22 billion pounds of crawfish. It's economically important, it's culturally important, and we hope that you agree with us that it's important enough to do a master plan on. This is a little bit of background on the planning efforts that have taken place in the past. Currently, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers manages the Atchafalaya floodway system to support flood risk management. More recently, the state and federal interest has expanded to include restoration and navigation. In 1982, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers conducted a feasibility study for the Atchafalaya Basin. The Louisiana Department of Natural Resources in 1998 completed the Louisiana State Master Plan for the Atchafalaya Basin. And then there are annual plans developed previously by LDNR. More recently, this responsibility was transferred to CPRA in 2018, so now CPRA continues to do these annual plans. I just want to clarify that that is a separate effort from the master plan, and although the master plan is in development, the annual plan process will continue as usual, and those projects will continue to be implemented according to that plan. Under Governor John Bell Edwards, the Atchafalaya River Basin Restoration and Enhancement Task Force, also known as ARBOR, was active, and one of their recommendations was to take a new look at the Atchafalaya Master Plan, and that brings us up to date. So this is our current plan boundary. It's about 1.5 million acres. The northern boundary is in Simsport, and it runs all the way to the south of Mexico, to the Gulf of Mexico, to the south. North of Morgan City, north of Morgan City, it is bounded by the Guy levees. South of Morgan City, our western boundary includes Westcote Launch Bay and Atchafalaya Bay to the east. It does not include Marsh Island or Point Fur, as you can see from the map. It's a little harder to visualize. To break this up into more manageable units, we've developed a watershed planning unit. There are 11 They were based on the Huck-10 boundaries, but then we used natural dividers and things such as levees or rivers that interrupt hydrology to help break down the system even more. You can see from the map that these watershed planning units range in size, and they vary greatly. The land cover types also vary. In the northern reaches, you'll see more upland and cultivated crops. In the bottomland, hardwood and swamp forested areas throughout the middle of the basin, and then moving south, you'll see fresh, intermediate, brackish, and saline marshes. That's kind of the area where you'll see the compound flooding or riverine flooding, as Mr. Hidalgo talked about. That brings us to some of the challenges and considerations in the Atchafalaya Basin. They're slightly different than our coastal issues. Hydrology has been altered throughout. The main issue there is interruption to the north to south sheet flow. Sedimentation is another issue. Unlike the coast, that's sediment starved. We have a lot of sediment in the basin. This can lead to water quality issues by preventing water from flowing through the back swamps to the main channel and that exchange. It also leads to a flood risk with these hydrologic changes and navigation issues. Another thing that is noted by the Port of Morgan City with flood issues and navigation issues, having to dredge those areas. And then, as you saw with the large area that we're representing, there are multiple stakeholder groups, different priorities and interests, and sometimes they compete. Taking all that into account, we've set these goals and objectives for the Atchafalaya Master Plan. They are heavily aligned with the Coastal Master Plan, so they may look familiar, but they're tailored to this system. The main goal is to manage the use of the river system sediments and water to maximize ecosystem function, as well as support continued human uses. We would like to promote a sustainable ecosystem by using these natural processes from the river. We want to continue to provide habitats that are suitable for not only conservation, but commercial and recreational activities as well. We recognize that this is a unique cultural area. We want to sustain that. And we also recognize that it is a working river system. We want to promote a viable working river system to support regional and nationally important business and industry. I'd like to take this time to note that this plan is focused on restoration and conservation actions, not on addressing flood risk. As previously mentioned, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers currently manages the system for flood risk mitigation. So, as covered, we've developed our goals and objectives for the overall plan. We're still looking at that watershed planning unit level. We'd like to get into some more detailed objectives for those watershed planning units. We're currently identifying candidate projects for our watershed planning units and the overall plan. These projects are being sourced from various places, including previous project submissions for previous plans, the annual plans, and then, as Brian mentioned, we just completed 4 public meetings all around the basin to hopefully get some project submissions from the public. We will take those projects once they're identified, and we'll send them through a screening process. We'll compare them to the objectives that we're trying to reach. And we will model the project effects based on those objectives. We'll assess project performance and refine the projects as needed in that phase. And the project development team can also develop projects, the plan development team can also develop projects based on the future conditions that we are predicting. In this project evaluation stage, we'll consider project costs, we'll score and rank projects against the objectives by the WPU, and then we will also use a basin scale modeling to evaluate projects and look for synergy. After that, we'll develop and finalize the master plan. At this point, we'll incorporate programmatic strategies, kind of like Mr. Lazina touched on in the previous presentation. These strategies are harder to pinpoint the time and place where they might be most effective, but the plan will recommend them programmatically. Something like invasive species control would work under a programmatic strategy. So we may know that we have to spray for Chinese tallow to remove that. We recognize that that would be important and useful for the plan, but we can't pinpoint exactly where that might happen over the plan period. So we recognize that the public engagement and input throughout this process is vital to the success of the plan. Brian touched on a little bit of this earlier. We hosted an introductory webinar in October that is currently recorded and put on our website. We also hosted our project solicitation meetings. We had 4 in-person meetings and a webinar for that as well, and that is also recorded and currently available on our website. As I mentioned, this is a 4-year process, so we hope to have ongoing engagement and key plan development milestones. For this plan, we stood up these 3 separate groups to help us really engage with the user groups that are present throughout the basin. The first of these groups is the steering committee. This was designed to really communicate with local, tribal, state, and federal agency personnel who are engaged in system activities, who work in the basin and are familiar with the ongoings throughout the system. Our working group is more tailored to subject matter experts who can provide technical input and feedback on key elements of the Chapel Master Plan. Our collaborative engagement group was more public facing. We're looking for community members who represent all of the different interest groups throughout the basin, ranging from environmental and recreational all the way to industry and landowners, commercial fisheries. It's a very diverse group. And we meet with them to determine how potential management approaches and projects or concepts may affect their sectors. All of this is done under the CPRA board and the Governor's Advisory Commission. These are the resources that are currently available at our website. You can find our website under the Our Plan tab of the CPRA website. As mentioned, you can find the recorded public webinar, our recorded project solicitation webinar, some basic info and overview of the plan, as well as our project solicitation survey link. I'll get into that a little bit more in the next couple slides, and then we'll have our frequently asked questions as well. There's also a way for people to enter their email address and communicate with the team with any ideas or comments. So, as I mentioned, we're currently in our project solicitation period. Originally, it was going to end at the end of January, but we have extended it to February 2025. This process includes 3 steps. We'll do the project screening, as I previously discussed. There'll be a detailed evaluation for the projects that make it through the initial screening, and then we will prioritize them and include them in our final master plan. Any individuals who submit a project will receive feedback. It may take a little while. We have a fairly small team, and we're doing this individually. So as projects are submitted, though, we will let the submitter know where their project is in the review process. We also, it is a requirement to include your contact information when you submit a project idea. This is so that we can reach back out if maybe not enough information was provided or we need clarification. As discussed, we can also refine these projects. So if we have multiple projects that are submitted with similar ideas or within the same area, we can possibly combine them and we can let those individuals know that as well. As we mentioned, we had 4 in-person meetings, 1 in Morgan City, New Road, Cecilia, and Plaquemine. And then we have our recorded webinar that, as I mentioned, is available on our website. This is the one-pager that we've provided at our meetings. We also worked with local libraries to get this available at their computer sections in the library, just so that we can help facilitate this project solicitation, even for those who do not have internet access at home. I have a couple of these cards with me today if anybody would like one. The QR code will take you directly to our project solicitation website. There you will also find a recorded tutorial on how to enter the project. We're using ArcGIS Survey 123. It's a very easy program to submit. It tailors the questions based on the project type that you select. These are the project types that we will be considering. This is also in the little one-pager that I have, and that is available at the libraries. These project types are also listed in the survey itself, so it will explain to you what each of these project types is. Once you select your project type, then the questions become specific to that project type, so it helps us really shorten the survey. That way you're not answering freshwater diversion questions for a hydrologic restoration project. We've had a lot of success showing this process to people. The mapping aspect of it is great. You can pinpoint exactly where you want to put your project. I highly recommend going and look at the tutorial on our website. That'll walk you through those steps. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions, comments? Yeah, Mr. Bouchard.
Good presentation. You mentioned that the hydrologic unit codes didn't exactly match up to your hydrologic project areas. Would there be any benefit, and I guess I can hear about this in this project area as well as other things that we're working on, to try to get USGS to change the hydrologic unit codes to update it to the data that you have? I mean, this is a crazy active basin, relatively speaking. It would seem to me that they should line up with us, because I can think of, Upper Barataria and some things that we're talking about in Upper Barataria. I'm sure for almost the opposite reason, a lack of water, those hydrologic unit codes are out of date as well. So it just, maybe there's an advantage to that, and if you get any federal money poured in, then the hydrologic unit codes would match. I don't know if that's ever been considered.
Not in that particular way. I think this is something we're, the states moved more to, as it were. The federal, I can tell you, the previous federal study was similar but bigger, and so I don't think it's going to limit federal. It's not something that's off the table, but maybe we'll get through this and we see where we go.
I was just thinking that, I don't think USGS knows any better than us where these actual barriers are.
Well, it's so difficult in this area, and I had a question from a member of the public on why we stopped at the levees for the study, and it was because it's so darn hard that's the area that deserved the treatment. We do the master plan outside, the state's coastal master plan outside, and we generally know that, but that's why we're in between the levees, because things change across the bayou. The problem is, whether it's those hucks or whether it's this plan, life has changed a whole lot in the last 50 years, and so I think it's hard to keep behind this area. Like Paige said, that even the flows are different now than when those codes were sort of.
All right, it makes the hucks wrong.
Yeah.
In essence, the federal hucks, so.
Yep.
Just thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a good comment, too. Thank you. Yep.
Any other questions? I have one. How much is privately owned the Chapel Basin?
Quite a bit.
You don't know the acreage?
I don't.
It's like the 1.5 million acres.
It's similar to the other, maybe even a little bit higher than some of the areas in the coastal zone. The Corps is a large landowner. The state is a bit of a landowner, but when it comes to that, mostly, there's a particular challenge in the area of working because of the private ownership in there. So it's a good bit. Yeah.
Can you give me the breakdown if you could?
I absolutely will. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on the point that Dwayne raised as it relates to funding. This is incredibly frustrating from my perspective, because you look at the fact that Everglades is roughly 1.5 million acres. They receive roughly $500 million from the federal government on top of allocating 1.5 from their state budget to restoration of the Everglades. Meanwhile, we as a delegation had to fight to get the Corps to completely pay for a study of Lower Miss that doesn't exactly focus specifically on the Everglades. On top of that, the Chapalaya Basin is one of the largest, or the largest, river swamp in the U.S., right? So it's got a huge impact on everything that we do, especially when it comes to navigation, fisheries, flood protection, everything. That said, the fact that we do have the study paid for is good, the Lower Miss study, but you maybe touch on this, I'll probably fuming over the fact that we aren't treated the same way as the Everglades, but how are those two gonna work together, the Chapalaya Master Plan and the Lower Miss study?
Good question. Since they control the levers for a lot of this area that we're talking about, Mr. Hidalgo mentioned. So we actually do have my counterpart represents the Corps as part of the steering committee for the study. So we have that crossed off. Glenn mentioned we're also a part of where the state's sort of gate on that. And so we focus on bringing them to the table, and we're obviously at the table. But another approach we're doing on these things, and we've seen this so that we have a statewide Lower Mississippi River study as well, is we're taking different approaches on how we look and model things to be more core, sort of like in the modeling effort, because as you very well know personally, the core speaks in a certain language, and unless you speak that language, they won't move. So what we're doing is what the state needs, but also what we can do to make that needle move management-wise for the core. So this particular study is doing just that, our state study, so that we're bouncing things off. And the Corps has been, to their credit, very receptive, because obviously what conditions they use in their study, we want to know of to match those things. So really it's putting our foot through the door, sticking our noses where we can on that. We've done a very good job and so far receptive on the Corps. Yeah.
And as a national heritage area, is the Department of Interior involved, providing funding, expertise, analysis?
Not currently on this state-only project, so yeah. But the state personnel are that represent the heritage area.
Yes, good presentation. And I'm gonna repeat myself again about the amount of water that's gonna come down the Jack Line. And, we really need to watch this study and make sure, more water is not gonna help us. And, this Corps of Engineers study is very important for us to watch. And it's not just the state of Mississippi that's trying to protect the area, but we have got to protect the Jack Line.
And with that, Mr. Dago, we're likely to see a lot of recommendations from the core study that tear off other studies. They just won't have the time and ability to do that. And so what we're also hopeful with what the state's doing is getting out in front, is maybe we get the language on those tier studies in a little bit better posture for the state and locals to be able to do that. So it's not left to opening, Pandora's box and everything else, because we've already done a little bit of that work. So that's also one of our goals as well with this.
Yeah, we just have to hear over and over again that it could be perhaps detrimental to us if we allow more water to come down the Jack Line. And I think the more people that hear and say and talk about it, the more we're going to protect our area. Thank you.
100%, because even 5% increase is made to the Terrebonne, to St. Mary, Fouche, area, St. Louis.
It virtually makes all of the protection that we have building up right now, for example, Bayou Chenique, it makes it obsolete because it's probably going to violate the design criteria we have for the structure. So it's important for all of these things to be looked at and pay attention to.
Yeah, well, I actually brought that up when we had, at Mugan, old structures with the kernel, that by increasing the water flow, right now the trigger that 7 foot and more, we city to open up, I mean, to close Bayou chain, because that could trigger it to close more often where vessels have trouble getting in and out. So very good point, Mr. Dow.
Yes, I think we need to get some photographs also of when the Morgans was opened in 2011, the erosion that it caused in that area and the damage that it caused. So it would be over and over again if we open up the Morgans, more often as compared to opening up the monetary building.
Good point.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Well,
Again, a very good presentation. In there, you mentioned an estimated average annual commercial harvest of nearly 22 million pounds of crawfish. That industry has been hammered over the past few years by environmental factors. They are treated differently at the federal level than other marine fisheries. As an inland fishery, NOAA does not qualify them for federal disaster grants. And so any help that we can get working with the federal delegation to talk to NOAA to get them included in disaster funding would be huge. And anything that we can get out of this comprehensive plan to increase the habitat for that fishery would go a long way for this fisherman. They are critical to our way of life, our culture in Louisiana, and we do not want to see that in decline. So I appreciate you bringing this to us.
okay, any other questions? Comments? Okay, with that, we thank you, Ms. Green, Mr. Lazeem. And last but not least, federal update of 2024 year-end review of Neil McMillan, DNR.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. Glad to be here today to talk about some really positive momentum on the revenue sharing front, as well as just kind of a quick look into what the rest of the year, the rest of the Congress could mean for policy. It's definitely a year where many big things have been left to the final month of the whole Congress. So we'll get into it. Yesterday, we got the RISE Act through the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. It was done by a voice vote, so unanimous bipartisan support. This happened in 2022 as well, but it's been harder to get through the chairman. Chairman Manchin of West Virginia. It's been hard to get through him this year, as he's been much more concerned about the scoring of the bill, which unfortunately does affect revenue sharing because the dollars go to the Treasury before coming to the states, even though it's kind of new money in a way. But encouragingly, Senator Cassidy felt confident enough to, at the hearing, say that he has some good momentum. Pay-fors identified that should cover the full cost. We don't have a current cost estimate, but it's kind of the $13 to $14 billion range for the whole bill. So that is a big lift, but we're glad to hear him say that. And, this was a major procedural hurdle, but we still got more to go to get it done this year. Mr. Ballard's reporting on the RISE Act, he said, Senator Cassidy said there's about 14 days left to get it all the way through. So Senator Cassidy doesn't think it will get a floor vote and then go to the House and do the same. It's kind of let me get this attached to the end of your package. So I kind of view this like in football, this is a 2-minute drill. I'm not sure how many timeouts we have, but it's we're in the game, but we have to be really effective. And fortunately, we got some great playmakers, but challenges are securing that pay for, getting enough member enthusiasm, and overriding a couple folks that oppose it. But first and goal would be awesome, yeah. I think we got a little longer to go, but we may have to do a 2-point conversion, but we got to get a play for that with the speaker and the majority leader, right? So what would this mean if we could get it done this year? LSU Center for Energy Studies, thanks to the work of Dr. Upton and some of his team, got some new numbers on this, and it went up about 10% in value for the state. So we're looking at almost $2.2 billion over the next 2 years from the GOMESA side, and as written, we probably get about almost $17 million from wind directly, with some more to come down. And then I love my charts. So there's a lot of charts today, but you'll see kind of what's that mean yearly if we had it done. You just see that it starts out with about an extra $100 million for the coastal program, but it really grows, and 6 to 10 years from now, it starts really surging upwards. And so, towards the end of the year, we kind of forecast it to be about $400 million more for the coastal program. And that's based off the royalties get produced from GOMESA eligible leases coming online. If we don't get this passed, you'll see that purple line that goes horizontal. That's where we are right now with the cap going into effect. Cap's going into effect 3 out of 7 years of the phase 2 GOMESA, but the past 2 years in a row, we expect it to be hit indefinitely, which leaves us about $156 million a year, which is significant, but obviously we could almost double it quite soon based on these projections. And we also have some other numbers to look at, like what would, if we had done this in 2022, and we were in a similar situation, what would the benefit be? And these numbers are derived from the Department of Interior's exact calculations. We're able to kind of extrapolate on that. If the cap was gone, which is what the RISE Act does, is removes the GOMESA cap, the Breeze Act that's passed the House does a few other things like remove sequestrations, I guess, fee, and increases the percentage to 50, which is something everybody in Louisiana supports, which is kind of about the feasibility. But it looks like, I guess, if the cap had been gone in 2023, instead of sharing 353 million for the 4 Gulf states, it would have been 590 million. Oil and gas prices were up. That would have been a great time to take advantage of the cap. And based on calculations, with just the cap removed, we would have had a 58% increase in income at $88 million. And I was talking to Senator Kennedy's staff, and he was like, well, what is that? What can you do with $88 million? And I think we have so many great examples of lots of miles of levee improved, lots of marsh built. So we're really going to try to capture that and visualize that. Then you also see that if Breeze had gone into effect, when you combine all those policy levers, would have been over 100% increase, about 190 million more. So we're now able to take this to other states and say specifically, here's what you've already been missing since we haven't got this done, and it's had a good reception, even if it is disappointing when you think about what we can do with it. So the support's been building. Again, not as widespread as all of us would like, but there's been kind of a good influx of Win State support. You'll see the blue ones, 6 of them our Shores Coalition met with, and so that's been good to see successful. There's some decent coverage, though there's still some gaps that I know Mr. Lane always likes to mention why we have to work on my home state of Mississippi or Alabama, but we'll try that. And some people, as I'm an Ole Miss guy, some people ask me if I know about the Ole Miss LSU score, and I do know about that. I was actually there, and my dad said he'll never buy me another ticket because I'm bad luck. But moving on, we have had some offshore wind activity, and I like to show this because it kind of drives national support for the RISE Act. The Gulf of Maine, which is really Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts lease sale. It happened, and it was about 22 million, which is not a super high number, and only 4 of the 8 leases were taken up. But I'm not as disheartened by this because this is deep water floating wind, which is a new technology. It's a lot further off than platforms in shallow water. And so there's more time to come here, but at least it's got Massachusetts and Maine a lot more engaged in the RISE Act conversation, which is really good. There's some congressional leadership from Massachusetts on the House side that's important. And then there's also some developments in the wind leasing in the Gulf of Mexico. BOEM had canceled the lease sale because there wasn't much commercial interest, and then one company was like, well, we don't have to compete, let's go for it. But recently, I think just last week, another company reached out. So since there's multiple companies expressing interest, BOEM will have to do a competitive lease sale. And there's no timeline. They'll have to be done in the next administration, which the president-elect's had a lot of concern about wind, so we'll see what that means. But I guess it's intriguing that there's still more interest in our area. And then Oregon, there's been a lot of pushback based off the floating technology, which has more fisheries impact. So I guess there's definitely regional differences and kind of have to navigate that. But Oregon Senator let the RISE Act, voted for the RISE Act yesterday, so that was nice to see. So here's what we can see happen, I guess, for the rest of the few weeks we have this Congress before it starts all over in January. And I'll kind of run through different bills and why they matter for the coast. So the defense bill is very likely to pass. It almost always does. And what's noteworthy was 2 years ago it contained the WRDA bill. And so maybe this is a vehicle for WRDA as well. We'd love to get that done. We have a lot of provisions teed up for the coastal program there. So haven't had a word on whether it will go on there or if it goes kind of by itself. WRDA is so non-controversial this year, big picture, that it may be able to go solo, which would be great. And then on the funding side, Federal funding expires December 20th. There's kind of two schools of thought. House Republicans want to take it into next year, but there's more Republican control of Congress administration, and maybe they could change spending up. Leader Scalise thought of doing a continuing resolution, which is flat funding, even proposed doing it throughout the whole year. The challenge on that for the coastal program is earmarks would not be included, most likely in a CR, as they call it, which would slow down a lot of our priorities and core projects. So hopefully there's a way to eventually get those turned loose. And then the other school of thought from the Democrat side is to pass a large omnibus bill. This is when you run the whole government at once with earmarks. And historically, something really big like that, you can add more provisions. I think the RISE Act would have a better shot at that scenario than most other options. But there's a lot of pushback against doing that too. So we'll definitely have a pre-Christmas showdown, but we'll see what goes there. And then on the disaster supplemental, the urgency of this got really high after Milton and Helene. We're tracking that because we're interested in getting some funding based off Hurricane Francine. I mean, we had direct landfall of Cat 2, had federal projects kind of in the territory that could be improved, and this shows what kind of things that we could be doing on West Shore, on Morganza, on Upper Barataria. I mean, it's just such a reminder. But President Biden released his funding request yesterday, or I guess late Monday. It was $400 billion, and he did not mention Francine in it at all. There's a little amount of core funding, but not significant in the big picture. And I guess that's honestly that's a testament to coastal program success that a Cat 2 hurricane doesn't even really register for a federal disaster because they have infrastructure that works. But we all know we got to get our infrastructure done for the bigger storms. So we're definitely working with the delegation, and it's not the end of the story there. But I think there's a high chance that could happen. And if we don't get attached to that one, we're probably out of luck for a big surge until the next one. And then we've talked about permitting reform. It even came up today thanks to President Jewell. There's a package up there, but with the post-election, it's seen as a very low chance. The Republicans want to do something more intense. So RISE Act was topical of that because it dealt with offshore oil and gas, but I think that's a low likelihood now. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to answer questions. I guess one more thing is thanks to so many in this room and on the board that have supported our coalition and our efforts in DC. And we definitely didn't see it pay off, and Louisiana's definitely leading, and we'll try to lead it all the way.
Neil, thank you for your hard work and keeping everybody abreast of what's going on and your trips to Washington. Thank you very much. And President Buell.
I just want to say thanks for all the work that you're doing. It's good to see some movement, although, I'm not sure just with the timeline that it's going to make it through that whole process. And obviously, once the Congress ends, all bills will have to be reintroduced into the new Congress and start the process somewhat over. Mr. Davidson mentioned it before about the amount of money going to, say, the Everglades National Park or the other national parks throughout the country. It really does make my blood boil. And just for people at home watching and the audience, one of the biggest travesties that ever happened that people really don't know about was the Great American Outdoors Act that passed because they used Louisiana as a bank, right? They take about $900 million, Dustin, is about $900 million to $1 billion of oil and gas revenues that are mostly generated in the Gulf of Mexico and come through Louisiana to fund backlog maintenance at national parks throughout the country. Now, I love national parks. I hope to visit them all. They're great. But they're not doing anything to protect the actual funding source that they're using to do that. So, just going forward, and I know we were out in front of this at CPRA, but we really have to stay engaged on issues like this and try to work our way into that legislation as well. And Mr. Davidson, I know you were up there at the time as well when that was going on.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up horrible memories. But no, you're absolutely right. $900 million every year in perpetuity for Land and Water Conservation Fund to purchase new land out west. The majority of this land is in areas where people don't live, and you have to travel a significant amount of distance to get to. But then on top of that, there was the park legacy bill that included an additional few billion for that backlog maintenance. So in essence, yes, we had to pay for, the Gulf producing states had to pay for new purchases of land and the restoration of land that the federal government currently cannot manage very well. It's important to note that a lot of the argument for that was the fact that recreational access to this land is dwindling because of the aging infrastructure, but it was lost on a lot of members of Congress the fact that our actual coast is disappearing into the Gulf of Mexico because of lack of funding. And so, moving forward, as President Jewell said, it's important that we stay engaged on this, continue to carry that message, and it's also great that we have more allies in this fight, people understanding exactly what's at stake here, because it's not just us that's dealing with coastal land loss now. You see it on the East Coast, the Carolinas are dealing with it, Virginia's dealing with it, Rhode Island doesn't have much coastline to deal with, but they're dealing with it too. So it's important that we make sure that not only do we stay engaged, but we keep our partners in this effort as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, some comments on that is, big picture, we get less than 5% of what we produce. Interior states get 50. And they did use that delta as a piggy bank for tripling, I guess, Land Water Conservation Fund gets triple what the Gulf states get. And then that national park backlog on top of it in the billions. And there was a hearing this year where the national parks people said, oh yeah, you know how we said it was about $5 billion to fix all the parks, but we were wrong by like a factor of 4. It's really like $20 billion. And so they'll be coming for our money again. We as in the oil produced off our shores is the #1 non-tax source of revenue for the whole country. And they will grab it until it's all tied up. And that's why we got to tie it up for ourselves before it gets redirected.
Just to your point, I mean, we're sitting here saying, man, we're scrapping to turn 150 million into potentially 300 million by lifting the cap. And we're like, hey man, that would be great if we could do that. Meanwhile, we're buying more federal land, which is completely unnecessary. We're fixing roads and national parks that should be trying to figure out ways to do that themselves through their fees and everything else they charge, while our literal homes are falling into the Gulf of Mexico. So it just can't be stated enough that that the way we're being treated is completely unfair in the grand scheme of all of this. So we'll keep up the good fight, and again, thanks for everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, I share your frustration, and this isn't fair, but my question goes to, so if we don't finish this in the 2-minute drill, and we're going over time, next Congress, Barrasso becomes chair, is that likely?
So Utah's, Ranking Member Barrasso is going to be the #2 Republican in leadership. So he'll withdraw from committee positions. Senator Lee of Utah will take over the gavel. They tapped him this week for it. And he is definitely a very tough guy on the deck. So I think that's one of the harder things for us to get the true value is that score. So whereas, there's some thoughts that the next administration Congress combo is better for us, I think that's one area where it probably is tougher for us. We'll have to make the case that states deserve the funding. And the new Democrat on the Senate committee is Senator Heinrich of New Mexico. And this is actually, I think, really good news for us because he's very pro renewable energy, and New Mexico gets the most revenue sharing from onshore by like a huge factor. So he's been a supporter for RISE Act. So I think each time it changes, there's pros and cons, but we ran out of time in 2022, and we're have even less time now. So it's a tough thing we're doing. We'll see.
Yeah, I didn't know, I couldn't look it up while I was here, but whether it was gonna be Wyoming or Utah, but those are both, you know, federal land states, as well. So maybe we can get them to start to realize that some of the benefits of this. Anyway, that was.
Yeah, and we met with, as a Shores Coalition, we met with Senator Lee's staff several times and some of the other Utah members, which, I know certain times Shores Coalition members are like, why are you sending me to Colorado or Utah? Well, I'm glad we did. So it's not completely, brand new.
Any other comments, questions? And we'll move to public comment. Any public comment? Going once? No public comment. With that, I have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Bouillon, unanimous second. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. God bless the veterans. Thanks everyone for coming.